Hello, hello, hello. How are we? We doing good? I hope so. I hope so. Um, yeah, I like every time we do this, it's like I'm gonna sit down, I'm gonna have a cute little anecdote, and then I'm gonna talk about reading. I don't have a cute little anecdote because I just went and grabbed all of the books that I am either currently reading or just finished that I haven't necessarily talked about, and I just want to talk about them. So I think we're gonna skip the cute little anecdote, which I did not prepare this time. Hey, Wadsworth, hello. Which I guess this is the anecdote. An anecdote about not having an anecdote. So meta. Okay, so things that I have read but haven't discussed. Berserk. This is the very last edition that Kentaro Miura wrote before he died, and it's oh, sorry for the glare. It's really good. It's just so good, and it's so, I don't know. It's great to see the evolution of how the story and the characters have developed. And I think Miura started the first, like the very first, when he was like 19, like super, super young. And you can tell that, like, as he's matured, the characters have also matured, which is really nice. But, like, at the very beginning, all of the action and everything is just like very in your face, and there's like very little nuance and there's very little layers, and it's just like, this is how the things are. And like, I just care so much for all of these characters, including wanting to know more and more and more about all of the villains. And it's just so good. Uh Lots of trigger warnings though. So just be aware of that before if going in, but it's really, really good. It has been an inspiration for a lot of different things. And if you're a video gamer, definitely any of the Miyazaki stuff, so any of the Souls games, Elden Ring, all of that kind of stuff. Um, so the rest of the story, so the story's not finished, even though this is the last version that he wrote, and he has notes of how he wants it to finish, and he has talked to somebody who is very close to him, and that person is going to be finishing the story, and they have already promised that they are not going to drag it out or to add any unnecessary things outside of Mura's vision. So that's really nice, and I hope that it continues. um, and I've read, this is so dorky, but Dragon Ball. I've been patiently waiting for Dragon Ball to continue, and it hasn't quick enough. So I am starting where I left off, and I'm just like reading now, and I'm enjoying it so far. And the humor in this is always like a nice little like dopey, sometimes breath of fresh air between all of the like heavier action sequences. So that's really cool. Red Talus, good to see you. Hello. Wadsworth, thank you so much for contributing to Sunday's stream. So yeah, this is, you know, just a continuation. It's just me being a nerd. And then Star recommended Yotsuba, and I'm on volume 9, so I read the first few on a reading sprint, and then I'm just continuing it. There are 16, 15, something like that. So this is also, it's super, super lighthearted. The like drama or the action in between these are things like Yatsuba misunderstood a word, or Yatsuba had a dream that her dad ate all of her candy, like those sorts of things. So super, super low stakes. And it's just about this little girl who is like learning and like growing during the summer. And it's really cute. It's super sweet. Like this is the animation or the art. So it's like really wholesome and sweet, and it's nice between to read between all of the like darker and heavier things that I read. Speaking of darker and heavier, these next two are definitely that. I am reading The Left Hand of Darkness. Sorry for the foiling makes it really hard to see, but it's The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula K. Le Guin, and she is like mama sci-fi, and I'm so excited. This is the first book that I am reading by her, and I don't know why, because I thoroughly enjoy science fiction. She wrote an introduction that just talks about science fiction in general and how science fiction writers do not predict the future. They are just talking about current day. It just happens to take place on a different planet, or far out in the future, or whatever it is. But it is about this other world and learning about their customs, their cultures, like that sort of thing. It's interspersed with like journal entries from people who have come to the planet earlier and have established like this planet as like an okay addition to their like allyship, like that sort of thing. So like that's interspersed with like the current timeline, and it's a little hard to explain, but it is about like learning, or what I'm getting out of it is learning about a new species and how different it is and things like that. And is good. And there's a lot of discussion on like gender and gender roles and things like that, which is really cool because the gender roles are different on this planet than they are on Earth or on the planet that they're from. So it's really good. There's 252 pages, and I am currently on page 81. So enjoying it so far. And then I'm reading My Murder by Katie Williams. It came out today, June 6th. Very exciting. I got it sent to me by the publisher, and I'm just super, super excited. It is about this woman, Louise, or Lou, who was killed by a serial killer. She was the fifth and last victim, and she has been brought back to life. So she has been cloned, just like all of the predecessors in this string of murders, and they've all been brought back to life, and they all have their memories. They just don't remember their actual death. Like their short-term memory is just wiped. But it's really interesting because it is something that's still so new in this world, and you get little snippets of what life is like in this future world. Like all of the gameplay is in virtual reality, like that sort of thing. And she does go to a group therapy with the other victims, and they're talking about their experiences and trying to get back to normal life, things like that. And I am on page 117, excuse me, 117, and there are 291 pages, and so far I'm super enjoying it. The writing style is bordering like walking that line between accessible and literary. It is beautifully written, and yeah, I'm super enjoying it. But yeah, My Murder by Katie Williams. And I think that's all that I'm reading slash have recently read, I think. But today, we are reading more Don Quixote. We are, let me just grab this massive book. Doing my weightlifting for today. We are on page 200. I just want everything to be in the 200s. We're on page 727. There are 940 pages. This is the size of a normal book. And we're in part 2, about to start chapter 42. And what happened last? So, Sancho and Don Quixote are staying at this place of a duke and a duchess, and they have read the first part of the story that has been written about them, and they just think that it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. And so they are sort of toying with them and playing with their like delusion almost. They definitely had to invent more Roman numerals when this book came out. Yes. We don't have one for 50. Just make it an L. It's fine. Um and so yeah, so the Duke and Duchess are sort of playing along with their belief into being a knight errant and a squire. And so they're making promises to Sancho that he will be able to be the governor of an insula. And they have told all of their staff to sort of go along with it and like treat them as if you would, somebody highborn and whatever. And it is cruel almost, just like how they're messing with them. Like we have met other people who have known them through writing or reading about their history, but they haven't been so manipulative, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So, for example, they staged this whole thing with a mage, I think, who said that the only way for Dulcinea of Toboso to go back to her beautiful self rather than a peasant is for Sancho Panza to whip himself 300,300 times, something like that. And or 330,000, I don't know, some like ridiculous amount. And then the other scenario that they set up was that all of these dueñas have grown beards because of this couple who refused to marry who they were supposed to. So now they are cursed, and all of these dueñas have like just massive beards. And so, in order to make that stop, Sancho and Don Quixote have to fly on a magical horse, unicorn, if you will, and Pegasus, but not named Pegasus, and get to this other, area where the person who cursed them is. And they have to fight, they have to duel, basically. So they get on this wooden horse. Sancho doesn't want to go. He doesn't like it. They blindfold them because they don't want them to, get scared and fall off, whatever. They blindfold them on this wooden horse, and what really happens is that they're blindfolded and they don't move at all. At all. And the wooden horse is filled with fireworks. And so they light the horse and the fireworks go off and it like throws Sancho and Don Quixote off. They take off their blindfolds and what they see is everybody passed out on the ground in the same area. Like they're not that dim. And they see a note that says, the curse has been lifted just by you attempting to do this. You have shown your valor, that sort of thing. And what Sancho says is that he peeked underneath his blindfold and he was playing with the stars and all of these things. And they were like, oh, like asking him questions about it because obviously this didn't happen and they know it didn't happen. And he's like, oh, yeah, like going along with it. And Don Quixote knows that this didn't happen. And so there is, at the very end of the chapter, it says, Don Quixote is talking to Sancho, and he says, Sancho, just as you want people to believe what you have seen in the sky, I want you to believe what I saw in the cave of Montesinos. And that is all I have to say. Which means Don Quixote knows that nothing really happened in the cave of Montesinos. But he wants people to believe that, and he wants to believe it. And he knows that Sancho didn't really play in the stars, but he knows that Sancho wants people to believe that, and Sancho wants to believe it. So it's sort of like a thing. Also, hello. Welcome in, Polu. Good to see you. Good to see you. So yeah, let's have a sip of water first, and then we'll just start. We'll just go right in. And I think that's everything. As always, if anything like comes up that I didn't mention, We will discuss. Okay, so chapter 42. Regarding the advice Don Quixote gave to Sancho Panza before he went to govern the insula, along with other matters of consequence. The successful and amusing conclusion of the adventure of the Dolorous One. Those were the one of the dueñas. So pleased the Duke and Duchess that they decided to move forward with their deceptions, seeing that they had a very accommodating individual who would accept them as true. And so, having devised their scheme and instructed their servants and vassals as to how they ought to behave towards Sancho in his governorship of the promised insula, the next day, which was the one following the flight of Clavileño, that was the horse, the wooden horse, the Duke told Sancho to prepare and ready himself to leave and be a governor, since his insulanos were waiting for him as if for the showers of May. So Sancho kneeled before him and said, "After I came down from the sky, and after I looked at the earth from the great height and saw how small it was, the burning desire I had to be a governor cooled a little. Where's the greatness in ruling a mustard seed, or the dignity or pride in governing half a dozen men the size of the hazelnuts? It seemed to me that this was all there was on the whole earth. If your lordship would be kind enough to give me just a tiny part of the sky, something no bigger than half a league, I'd be happier to take that than the best insula in the world." "Look, Sancho, my friend," responded the Duke, "I can't give anybody a part of the sky, even one no bigger than my nail. Those favors and dispensations are reserved for God alone. What I can give to you, which is an insula, right and true, round and well proportioned, and exceedingly fertile and bountiful, where, if you know how to manage things, with the riches of the earth you can approach the riches of the sky." "Well then," responded Sancho, "let's have the insula, and I'll do my best to be so good a governor that in spite of rogues and rascals I'll go to heaven. It isn't greed that makes me want to leave my hut or rise to better things, but a desire I have to try it and see if it tastes like what it tastes like to be a governor." "If you try it once, Sancho," said the Duke, "you'll long to eat it again, because it is a very sweet thing to give orders and be obeyed. I'm certain that when your master becomes an emperor, as he undoubtedly will, considering how things are going for him, nobody will be able to tear that away from him, and the time he spent not being one will grieve and sadden him in the very center of his soul. Falcor, good to see you. Hello." "Señor," replied Sancho, "I imagine that it's good to command, even if it's only a herd of the cattle." "Let them bury me with you, Sancho, for you know everything," responded the Duke, "and I expect you to be the kind of governor your good judgment promises. And let's say no more about it, and be advised that tomorrow morning you will leave to be governor of the insula, and this afternoon you will be outfitted with proper clothing and all the things necessary for your departure." And there is a note after "let them bury me with you," and it says, "a formula indicating complete agreement with another person's opinions." "They can dress me," said Sancho, "however they want. No matter what clothes I wear, I'll still be Sancho Panza." "That is true," said the Duke, "but clothes must suit the position or profession that one follows, for it would not be correct for a jurist to dress like a soldier, or soldier like a priest. You, Sancho, will be dressed partly as a lettered man and partly as a captain, because on the insula I'm giving you, arms are as necessary as letters, and letters as necessary as arms." "I don't have many letters," responded Sancho, "because I still don't know the ABCs, but it's enough for me to have the Christus in my memory to be a good governor. As for arms, I'll handle the ones I'm given, with God to lead me." And there is a note after Christus, and it says, the cross that is placed at the beginning of the alphabet in a child's primer. With a good memory, said the Duke, Sancho cannot err in any way. Just then, Don Quixote came in, and learning what had happened and how quickly Sancho was to leave for his governorship, with the permission of the Duke, he took Sancho by the hand and went with him to his room, intending to advise him on how he was to behave as governor. When he had entered his bedchamber, Don Quixote closed the door behind him and almost forced Sancho to sit down beside him, and in a tranquil voice he said, I give infinite thanks to God, Sancho, my friend, that before and prior to having found good luck, fortune has come out to welcome and receive you. I, who had set aside a portion of my success as payment for your services, find myself at the very beginning of my advancement, and you, before it is time and contrary to the law of reasonable discourse, find yourself rewarded with all your desires. Others bribe, importune, solicit, are early risers, plead, persist, and do not achieve what they long for. And another comes along, and without knowing how or why, finds himself with the office and position that many others strove for. And here the saying certainly applies and is appropriate. Aspirations are ruled by good and bad fortune. You, who, in my opinion, are undoubtedly adult, and who, without rising early or staying up late or making any effort whatsoever, with nothing more than the breath of knight-errantry that has touched you, without further ado find yourself governor of an insula as if it were of no consequence. I say all this, O Sancho, so that you do not attribute the kindness you have received to your own merits, but give thanks first to heaven for disposing matters so sweetly, and then to the greatness that lies in the profession of knight-errantry. Now, with your heart disposed to believe that what I have told you, pay heed, my son, to your Cato, who wishes to advise you and be a polestar, and guide that sets your course and leads you to a safe port on the tempestuous sea, where you are about to set sail, for offices and great responsibilities are nothing more than a deep gulf of confusions. 2 notes. The first one is after Cato, and it says, the author of a book of aphorisms, Disticha Catonis, which was so popular a text in schools that primers were called Catos. And then the second note is after Deep Gulf of Confusions, and it says, oh, it's a long note. All right, here we go. Don Quixote's advice to Sancho is one of the most famous passages in the novel. Martin de Ricoeur notes the difficulty of determining Cervantes' exact sources, although he states the general influence of Erasmus is evident, and he also cites a handful of books on good government, both classical and Renaissance, available in Spanish at the time. Whatever the source, Don Quixote's remarks of the future governor are clearly the polar opposite of Machiavelli's counsel to the prince. First, my son, you must fear God, because in fearing him lies wisdom, and if you are wise, you cannot err in anything. Second, you must look at who you are and make an effort to know yourself, which is the most difficult knowledge one can imagine. When you know yourself, you will not puff yourself up like the frog who wanted to be the equal of the ox. And if you can do this, the fact that you kept pigs at home will be like the ugly feet beneath the peacock's tail of your foolishness. There's another note. After the frog who wanted to be equal to the ox, it says, an allusion to a fable by Phaedrus, a Latin fabulist of the 1st century who wrote in the style of Aesop. It's true, responded Sancho, but that's when I was a boy. Later, when I was a little older, it was geese that I kept, not pigs, but this seems besides the point. Not everybody who governs comes from the lineage of kings. That is true, replied Don Quixote. and for that reason those who are not of noble origin should bring to the gravity of the position they hold a gentle mildness which, guided by prudence, may save them from the malicious gossip that no station in life can escape. Take pride in the humbleness of your lineage, and do not disdain to say that you come from peasants, for seeing that you are not ashamed of it, no one will attempt to shame you. Take more pride in being a humble, virtuous man than in being a noble sinner. Innumerable men born of low family have risen to the highest pontifical and imperial dignity, and I can cite so many examples of this truth to you that you would grow weary. Consider, Sancho, if you take virtue as your means, and pride in performing virtuous deeds, there is no reason to envy the means of princes and lords, because blood is inherited, and virtue is acquired, and virtue in and of itself has a value that blood does not. This being so, as it is, if one of your relatives comes to see you while you are on your insula, do not scorn or insult him. On the contrary, you should welcome, receive, and entertain him. In this way you will satisfy heaven, which does not wish anyone to scorn what it has created, and you will respond as you should to a well-ordered nature. If you bring your wife with you, because it is not a good idea for those who attend to governing for a long time to be without their own spouses, teach her, instruct her, and smooth away her natural roughness, because everything a wise governor acquires can be lost and wasted by a crude and foolish wife. If by chance you are widowed, which is something that can happen, and with your position you wish a better wife, do not take one to serve as your lure and fishing rod, and for the hood of your I don't want it, because it is true when I tell you that for everything received by the judge's wife her husband will be accountable at the universal reckoning, when he will pay 4 times over in death for the ledger entries he ignored in life. There's a note, as always, after I don't want it. It says, this is based on a proverb. I don't want it. I don't want it. Just toss it into my hood. That is quite the proverb. Never be guided by arbitrariness in law, which tends to have a good deal of influence on ignorant men who take pride in being clever. Let the tears of the poor find in you more compassion, but not more justice, than the briefs of the wealthy. Try to discover the truth in all the promises and gifts of the rich man, as well as in the poor man's sobs and entreaties. When there can and should be a place for impartiality, do not bring the entire rigor of the law to bear on the offender, for the reputation of the harsh judge is not better than that of the compassionate one. If you happen to bend the staff of justice, let it be with the weight not of a gift, but of mercy. If you judge the case of one of your enemies, put your injury out of your mind, and turn your thoughts to the truth of the question. Do not be blinded by your own passion in another's trial, for most of the time the mistakes you make cannot be remedied, and if they can, it will be to the detriment of your good name and even your fortune. If a beautiful woman comes to you to plead for justice, turn your eyes from her tears and your ears from her sobs, and consider without haste the substance of what she is asking, if you do not want your reason to be drowned in her weeping and your goodness in her sighs. If you must punish a man with deeds, do not abuse him with words, for the pain of punishment is enough for the unfortunate man without the addition of malicious speech. Consider the culprit who falls under your jurisdiction as a fallen man, subject to the conditions of our depraved nature, and to the extent that you can, without doing injury to the opposing party, show him compassion and clemency, because although all the attributes of God are equal, in our view mercy is more brilliant and splendid than justice. If you follow these precepts and rules, Sancho, your days will be long, your fame eternal, your rewards overflowing, your joy indescribable. You will marry your children as you wish, they and your grandchildren will have titles, You will live in peace and harmony with all people, and in the final moments of your life, in a gentle and ripe old age, the moment of your death will come, and the tender, delicate hands of your great-great-grandchildren will close your eyes. What I have said to you so far are the teachings that will adorn your soul. Now listen to the ones that will serve to adorn your body. End of chapter 42. Oh, hello. One day I'm gonna look up how to say your name. But hello, Unholy Wolf. Good to see you. Alright, so the Duke and the Duchess are like, this is so much fun. We must continue our deception. And so they promise Sancho the insula and say that we will get you dressed and we will get you on your way very soon. You must part ways pretty much immediately. And upon hearing this, Don Quixote goes to Sancho, pulls him aside, and just gives him a bunch of advice about how to govern people, how to uphold the, I don't know, the nature of being a governor, as well as like his wife being, you know, you have to groom her, like she can't be, you know, the way she is now, basically. She needs to act the part of being a governor's wife, that sort of thing. Interesting. Interesting. Okay. Chapter 43. Regarding the second set of precepts that Don Quixote gave to Sancho Panza. I knew we weren't done. You know how it is when Sancho gets on his rants. He just goes for forever. So of course there's more to it. Who could have heard this past speech of Don Quixote and not taken him for a very wise and well-intentioned person? But as has been said so often in the course of this great history, he spoke nonsense only with regard to chivalry, and in other conversations he demonstrated a clear and confident understanding, so that his actions constantly belied his judgment, and his judgment belied his actions. But in this manner, of the additional advice he gave to Sancho, he showed that he possessed great cleverness, and revealed to a very high degree both his intelligence and his madness. Sancho listened to him very attentively, and attempted to commit his advice to memory, like a man who intended to follow it and use it to bring the gestation of his governorship to a successful delivery. And so Don Quixote continued, and he said, "With regard to how you should govern your person and house, Sancho, the first thing I recommend is that you keep clean, and that you trim your nails and not allow them to grow, as some men do whose ignorance has led them to believe that long nails beautify their hands, as if those superfluous growths that they refuse to cut were nails, when they are actually the claws of a lizard-eating kestrel, a filthy and extraordinary abuse. Do not go around, Sancho, unbelted and negligent. Slovenly clothing is an indication of a listless spirit, unless slovenliness and negligence are actually a sign of shrewdness, as was judged to be the case with Julius Caesar. Determine with intelligence the worth of your position, and if it allows you to give your servants livery, let it be modest and useful rather than showy and splendid, and divide it between your servants and the poor. I mean, that if you are going to dress 6 pages, dress 3 of them, and 3 poor men, and in this way you will have pages both in heaven and on the ground. This unusual manner of giving livery cannot be understood by the vainglorious. Do not eat garlic or onion, lest your smell reveal your peasant origins. Walk slowly. Speak calmly. Do not in a way that makes it seem you are listening to yourself, for all affectation is wrong. Eat sparingly at midday, and even less at supper, for the health of the entire body is forged in the workshop of the stomach. Be temperate in your drinking. Remember that too much wine cannot help either a secret or a promise. Be careful, Sancho, not to chew with your mouth full or to eructate in front of everyone. So, again, like always, Don Quixote gives wonderful advice, and then he just takes a turn. Just takes a turn. And just starts spouting nonsense. I don't understand eructate, said Sancho. And Don Quixote said, eructate, Sancho, means to belch, which is one of the crudest words in the Castilian language, although it is very expressive, and so educated people have had recourse to Latin, and instead of belch, they say eructate, and instead of belches, eructations. And if some do not understand these terms, it matters very little, for in time their use will be introduced into the language, and they will easily be understood. This enriches the language, over which the common people and usage have control. Truly, señor, said Sancho, one of the pieces of advice and counsel that I plan to carry in my memory will be not to belch, because I tend to do that very often. Eructate, Sancho, not belch, said Don Quixote. I'll say eructate from now on, responded Sancho, and by my faith, I won't forget. Sancho, you also should not mix into your speech the host of proverbs that you customarily use, for although proverbs are short maxims, the ones you bring in are often so far-fetched that they seem more like nonsense than like maxims. God can remedy that, responded Sancho, because I know more say. I skipped a page. No wonder that didn't make any sense. Because I know more proverbs than a book, and so many of them come into my mouth at one time when I talk that they fight with one another to get out, but my tongue tosses out the first one it finds, even if they're not to the point. But I'll be careful from now on to say the ones that suit the gravity of my position, because in a well-stocked house, supper is soon cooked, and if you cut the cards, you don't deal, and the man who sounds the alarm is safe, and for giving and keeping, you need some sense. Go on, Sancho, said Don Quixote. Force the proverbs in. String them together one after another on a thread. No one will stop you. My mother punishes me, and I deceive her. I tell you to avoid proverbs, and in an instant you have come out with a litany of them that have as much to do with what we are discussing as the hills of Ube. Look, Sancho, I am not saying that an appropriate proverb is wrong, but loading and stringing together proverbs any which way makes your conversation lifeless and low-born. When you mount a horse, do not lean your back over the hind bow of the saddle, or hold your legs stiff and sticking out at an angle from the belly of the horse, or ride so carelessly that it looks as if you were riding your donkey. For riding a horse makes gentlemen of some men and stable boys of others. Canadian Nomad, so good to see you. Hello. Be moderate in your sleeping, for the man who does not get up with the sun does not possess the day. And remember, Sancho, that diligence is the mother of good fortune, and sloth her opposite. Never reached the conclusion demanded by good intentions. This final piece of advice that I wish to give you now, although it may not serve for the adornment of the body, I want you to remember very well, for I believe it will be no less useful to you than those I have given you so far, and it is that you should never become involved in arguing about lineages, at least in comparing one to the other, because of necessity, when they are compared, one has to be better, and you will be despised by the one you place lower, and not rewarded in any way by the one you deem higher. Your dress should be full-length breeches, a long doublet, and a slightly longer cape, Absolutely no pantaloons, for they do not become gentlemen or governors. For now, this is what has concerned, this is what has occurred to me to tell you. Time will pass, and my precepts will be appropriate to the occasion, if you are careful to inform me about the circumstances in which you find yourself. Señor, responded Sancho, I see very well that everything your grace has told me is good, holy, and beneficial. But what good will the precepts do if I don't remember a single one? It's true that what you said about not letting my nails grow and getting married again won't slip my mind if I can help it. But those other useless and complicated and troublesome things I don't remember, and I won't remember them any more than I do yesterday's clouds. And so you'll have to write them down for me. And though I don't know how to read or write, I'll give them to my confessor so that he can slip them in and remind me of them whenever it's necessary. So thoughtful. You're watching a tiger documentary. Amazing. I hope that makes your day better. I'm so sorry that work was meh. Oh, sinner that I am, responded Don Quixote. How bad it seems in governors not to be able to read or write, because you must know, Sancho, that a man not knowing how to read or being left-handed means one of two things. Either he was the child of parents who were too poor and low-born, or he was so mischievous and badly behaved himself that he could not absorb good habits or good instruction. This is a great fault in you, and I would like you at least to learn to sign your name. I know how to sign my name very well, responded Sancho, because when I was steward of a brotherhood in my village, I learned to make some letters like the marks on bundles, and they told me that they said my name. Better yet, I'll pretend that my right hand has been hurt, and I'll have somebody else sign it for me. There's a remedy for everything except death, and since I'll be in charge of everything, I can do whatever I want. Then, too, when your father's the magistrate, and being a governor, which is more than being a magistrate, just let them come and they'll see what happens. And there is a note after when your father's the magistrate, and it says, this is the first half of a proverb. When your father's the magistrate, you're safe when you go to trial. There you go. You inserted a pun. That's never a wrong thing. I love it so much. No, let them make fun of me and speak ill of me. They'll come from wool and go home shorn. And when God loves you, your house knows it. And the rich man's folly passes for good judgment in the world. And since that's what I'll be, being a governor and a very generous one, which is what I plan to be, nobody will notice my faults, any faults in me. Oh my gosh. Wadsworth, thank you so much for gifting a sub to Canadian Nomad. Thank you so, so much. No. Just like honey and the flies will go after you. You're only worth as much as you have, my grandmother used to say, and you won't get revenge on a well-established man. Oh, may you be accursed, Sancho, said Don Quixote at this point. May 60,000 devils take you and your proverbs. For the past hour you have been stringing them together, and with each one giving me a cruel taste of torment. I assure you that one day these proverbs will lead you to the gallows. Because of them your vassals will take the governorship away from you, or rise up against you. Tell me, where do you find them, you ignorant man, and how do you apply them, you fool? When to say only one that is really applicable, I have to perspire and labor like a ditch digger. By God, my lord and master, replied Sancho, your grace compliments about very small things. Why the devil does it trouble you when I make use of my fortune, when I have no other, and no other wealth except proverbs and more proverbs? And right now 4 have come to mind that are a perfect fit, like pears in a wicker basket, but I won't say them, because golden silence is what they call Sancho. Literally, nobody has called Sancho golden silence. I love that that's a nickname that he has just made for himself, and that's great. That, Sancho, is not you, said Don Quixote, because not only are you not golden silence, you are foolish speech and stubborn persistence. But even so, I should like to know which four proverbs came to mind just now that you were so to the point, because I have been searching my mind, and I have a good one, and I cannot think of a single proverb. So inaccurate. Which ones could be better? Said Sancho. Then never put your thumbs between two wisdom teeth. And there's no answer to get out of my house, and what do you want with my wife? And whether the pitcher hits the stone or the stone hits the pitcher, it's bad luck for the pitcher. They're all just fine, because nobody should take on his governor or the person in authority, because he'll come out of it hurt, like the man who puts his finger between two wisdom teeth. And if they're not wisdom teeth, but just plain molars, it doesn't matter. And there's no reply to what the governor says, like, leave my house, and what do you want with my wife? As for the stone and the pitcher, even a blind man can see that. So whoever sees the mote in somebody else's eyes has to see the beam in his own, so that nobody can say about him, the dead woman was frightened by the one with her throat cut. And your grace knows very well that the fool knows more in his own house than the wise man does in somebody else's. This is not so, responded Don Quixote, for the fool knows nothing whether in his own house or in another's, because on a foundation of foolishness no reasonable building can be erected. Enough of this now, Sancho, for if you govern badly, the fault will be yours, and mine the shame. But it consoles me that I did what I had to do, and advised you with all the truth and wisdom of which I am capable. Now I am relieved of my obligation and my purpose. May God guide you, Sancho, and govern you in your governorship, and free me of the misgivings I still have that you will turn the entire insula upside down, something I could avoid by revealing to the Duke who you are, and telling him that this plump little body of yours is nothing but a sack filled with proverbs and guile. Señor, replied Sancho, if your grace believes I'm not worthy of this governorship, I'll let it go right now, for I care more for a silver of nail from my soul than I do for your whole body, and just plain Sancho will get by on bread and onions as well as the governor does on partridges and capons. Besides, everybody's equal when they sleep, the great and the small, the poor and the rich, and if your grace thinks about it, you'll see that it was you alone who gave me the idea of governing, because I don't know any more about governorships of insulas than a vulture. If you think the devil will carry me off because I'm a governor, I'd rather go to heaven as Sancho than to hell as a governor. By God, Sancho, said Don Quixote, simply because of the last words that you have said, I judge you worthy of being the governor of 1,000 insulas. You have a good nature, and without that no learning is worthwhile. Commend yourself to God, and try not to wander from your first purpose. I mean that you should always have the firm and steady intention of doing the right thing in everything that happens to you, because heaven always favors virtuous desires. And now, let us go to dinner, for I believe the Duke and Duchess are waiting for us. End of chapter 43. Are these real idioms that have been translated, or is Sancho making them up? Yes. Sometimes when he does say proverbs, they are in quotes, and I'm assuming that those ones are direct translations, and other ones I think he's making up or just super badly remembering them, because most of them are not in quotes. Let's just say that. Yeah, let's just say that. Okay, so what happened in that chapter? We had conversations. Don Quixote giving more advice to Sancho and basically saying, like, dude, stop with the proverbs. They don't make any sense. You say 30 of them at a time. that have no bearing on the situation. Just stop. Sancho's like, all right, I'll try, but I can't. And then says like way more. And then Don Quixote is like, well, like, if you don't, I'm gonna tell the Duke just who you are. Like, you're just full of proverbs, and you can't do this. And then Sancho replies and was like, dude, I would rather go to heaven as Sancho than go to hell as a governor. And then Don Quixote is like, yes, yes, queen, yes, governor. That is exactly, just by that phrase, you have proven that you would be a great governor. Now let's go eat. So, it was a test, and you've passed. um, Congratulations, Sancho. Don Quixote thinks you're worthy of being a governor of this make-believe insula. Chapter 44. How Sancho Panza was taken to his governorship, and the strange adventure that befell Don Quixote in the castle. They say that in the actual original of this history, one reads that when Cid Hamate came to write this chapter, his interpreter did not translate what he had written, which was a kind of complaint that the Moor had concerning himself for becoming involved in a history as dry and limited as this one. For it seemed to him he always had to talk of Don Quixote and Sancho, not daring to wander into other digressions and episodes that were more serious and more entertaining. And he said that to have his mind, his hand, and his pen always fixed on writing about a single subject and speaking through the mouths of so few persons was an insupportable hardship, and whose outcome did not redound to the benefit of the author. In order to circumvent this difficulty, in the first part he had used the device of some novels such as The Man Who Was Recklessly Curious and The Captive Captain, which are, in a sense, separate from the history, although the other matters recounted there are events that occurred to Don Quixote himself, which he could not fail to write down. Have a good lurk. He also thought, as he says, that many readers, carried away by the attention demanded by the deeds of Don Quixote, would pay none at all to the novels, and pass them over entirely, or read them with haste or with annoyance, not realizing the elegance and invention they contain, which would be readily apparent if they came to light on their own, not depending on the madness of Don Quixote or the foolishness of Sancho. And so in this second part he did not wish to introduce any novels, whether detached or attached, but only some episodes born of the very events offered by truth, and even these in a very limited way, and using only the words needed to recount them, and so contained and enclosed within the narrow confines of the narration, even though he possesses the ability, competence, and understanding to deal with the entire universe. He asks that his work not be scorned, but praised, not for what he had written, but for what he has omitted from his writing. And then the history goes on to say that when Don Quixote had finished dinner on the day he gave advice to Sancho, he also wrote down the precepts so that Sancho could find someone to read them to him. But as soon as Don Quixote gave them to his squire, they came and fell into the hands of the Duke, who communicated them to the Duchess, and the two of them were astonished once more at the madness and intelligence of Don Quixote. And so, going forward with their deceptions, that afternoon they sent Sancho with a large retinue to the village that for him would be an insula. It so happened that the man in charge was one of the Duke's stewards, who was very intelligent and very humorous, for there can be no humor where there is no intelligence, and had played the part of Countess Trifaldi with the wit that has already been described. This, and the instructions he had received from the Duke and Duchess regarding how he was to behave with Sancho, meant that he achieved his purpose wonderfully well. I say, then, that as soon as Sancho saw the steward, he imagined that his face was the same as Countess Trifaldi's, and turning to his master, he said, "Señor, either the devil will carry me away from where I stand, suddenly and without warning, or your grace has to confess that the face of the Duke's steward, here present, is the same as the Dolores one." Dolores. Don Quixote looked carefully at the steward, and when he looked, he said to Sancho, "There is no reason for the devil to carry you off, Sancho, either suddenly or without warning, for I do not know what you mean. The face of the Dolores one may be that of the steward, but that does not mean the steward is the Dolores one. If he were, it would imply a very serious contradiction, and this is not the time to make such inquiries, for that would lead us into intricate labyrinths. Believe me, my friend, it is necessary to pray to our Lord very sincerely to save both of us from evil wizards and wicked enchanters." "It isn't a joke, señor," replied Sancho, "because I heard him talking earlier, and it seemed as if it was the voice of Countess Trifaldi were sounding in my ears. All right, I'll be quiet, but I'll stay on the alert from now on to see if I can find anything else that will prove or disprove what I suspect." "That is what you must do, Sancho," said Don Quixote, "and keep me informed regarding everything you discover in this matter, and everything that happens to you in your governorship." At last, accompanied by a good number of people, Sancho set out, dressed in the style of a lettered man, and over that wearing a very wide coat of tawny camel's hair, and a cap of the same material, and riding a mule with short stirrups. Behind him, by order of the Duke, came the grey, with new donkey trappings and a halter made of silk. From time to time Sancho turned his head to look at his jackass, in whose company he felt so content that he would not have traded places with the Emperor of Germany. When he took his leave of the Duke and Duchess, he kissed their hands and received the blessing of his master, who gave it to him in tears, and which Sancho received with sobs. Kind reader, let the good Sancho go in peace and good fortune, and expect 2 bushels of laughter when you learn how he behaved in office, and in the meantime wait and find out what happened to his master that night. And if you do not laugh at this, at least you will spend your lips wide in a monkey grin, because those things that befall Don Quixote have to be celebrated either with astonishment or with laughter. It is recounted that as soon as Sancho left, Don Quixote felt lonely for him, and if it had been possible for him to revoke the squire's mandate and take the governorship away from him, his master would have done so. The Duchess perceived his melancholy and asked him why he was sad, for if it was because of Sancho's absence, there were squires, dueñas, and maidens in her house who would serve him to his complete satisfaction. "It is true, señora," responded Don Quixote, "that I feel the absence of Sancho, but this is not the principal reason that makes me seem sad. Of the many offers your excellency has made, I accept and choose only the good will with which they have been proffered. For the rest, I implore your excellency that in my own chamber you allow and permit me to be the only one who serves me." "In truth," said the Duchess, "Señor Don Quixote, that cannot be. You will be served by 4 of my maidens who are as beautiful as flowers." "As far as I am concerned," responded Don Quixote, "they will be not like flowers, but like thorns piercing my soul. They will no more enter my chamber, or anything like that, than fly. If your highness wishes to proceed to grant me favors I do not deserve, allow me to accept them alone and to serve myself behind my chamber doors. For I place a wall between my desires and my modesty, and I do not wish to lose this custom because of the liberality your highness desires to show me. In short, I would rather sleep in my clothes than allow anyone to undress me." "Enough, enough, Don Quixote," replied the Duchess. "I can tell you that I shall give orders that not even a fly can enter your room, much less a maiden. On no account am I the person to interfere with the propriety of Señor Don Quixote, for it has become clear to me that the most outstanding of his many virtues is modesty. Your Grace may undress and dress yourself, and in your own fashion, however, and whenever you wish, there will be none to impede you, for in your chamber you will find the containers required for the needs of one who sleeps with a closed door, so that not even the necessities of nature will oblige you to open it. May the great Dulcinea of Toboso live for 1,000 centuries, and may her name be known throughout the world, for she deserved to be the beloved of so valiant and chaste a knight. And may benign heaven fill the heart of Sancho Panza, our governor, with the desire to conclude his whipping quickly, so that the world can once again enjoy the beauty of a great lady." To which Don Quixote said, "Your Grace has spoken like the person you are, for in the mouths of virtuous ladies there can be nothing that is wicked. Dulcinea will be more fortunate and renowned in the world for your highness's praise than for all the praises of the most eloquent men on earth." "Star, so good to see you. Hello, hi." "Well now, Señor Don Quixote," replied the Duchess, "it is time to eat supper, and the Duke must be waiting. Come, your Grace, and let us eat and retire early, for the journey you made yesterday to Candaya was not so short that it has not caused you some weariness." "I feel none at all, señora," responded Don Quixote, "for I can swear to your excellency that never in my life have I mounted a calmer animal or one with a better gait than Clavileño, and I do not know what could have moved Malambruno to destroy so swift and gentle a mount and burn him for no reason at all." "As far as that, I can imagine," responded the Duchess, "that he repented of the wrong he had done to Countess Trifaldi and her company, and to other persons, and the many acts of wickedness he must have committed as a wizard and an enchanter, and he wanted to put an end to all the devices of his profession, and since the wooden horse was the principal one that caused him the most concern wandering from country to country, he burned Clavileño, so that with those ashes and the trophy of the scroll, the valor of the great Don Quixote of La Mancha would be made immortal." Once again Don Quixote thanked the Duchess, and when they had eaten supper he withdrew to his chamber alone, not permitting anyone to come in to serve him. So fearful was he of facing situations that would move him or oblige him to lose the decorous modesty that he preserved for his lady Dulcinea, always keeping present in his imagination the virtue of Amadis, flower and model of all knights-errant. He closed the door after him, and in the light of 2 wax candles he undressed, and as he removed his shoes, oh, misfortune so unworthy of such a person, there was an eruption, not of sighs or anything else that would discredit the purity of his courtesy, but of some 24 stitches in a stocking that now looked like lattice work. The good gentleman was distraught, and he would have given an ounce of silver for just a small amount of green silk thread. I say green silk because his stockings were green. Here Benengeli interjected this exclamation, saying, "Oh, poverty, poverty! I do not know why the great poet of Cordoba was moved to call you holy and unwelcome gift." There is a note after Cordoba, and it says Juan de Mena, 1411 to 1456, probably the most historically significant courtly poet of the 15th century. It is interesting. I just realized as I was about to say something, I made another connection. It is interesting that Cervantes mixes in fiction with real people and real places and real events, just like Don Quixote mixes in real people, places, and events with fiction. And I just think that that's really cool and really clever. Hmm. Hmm. I, though a Moor, know very well, through the communication I have had with Christians, that holiness consists of charity, humility, faith, obedience, and poverty. But even so, I say that a man must be very close to God if he can be content with being poor, unless it is the kind of poverty about which one of the greatest saints says, possess all possess all things as if you possessed them not, and this is called poverty in spirit. But you, the second poverty, the one I am speaking of, why do you wish to crush gentlemen and the well-born men, the well-born more than other people? Why do you oblige them to patch their shoes and have them, oh my gosh, I am just messing up all over the place, to patch their shoes and have some buttons on their doublets that are of silk, and others of horsehair, and others of glass? Why must their collars, for the most part, always be crumpled and not open and smooth? And there are two notes in that. The first one is after one of the greatest saints, and it says Saint Paul, Corinthians, the first. And the second note is after why do you oblige them to patch? And it says Cervantes uses a phrase, dar pantalia, whose exact significance is not clear. It can mean either polishing or repairing shoes. Shelton translates it as cobble, but the contemporary French and Italian versions differ. That's all. I love when the translation notes kick in too. I think that's really interesting how it can be translated and how the translation changes the tone or what is actually being implied. Like, I just think that's super interesting. Words are cool, man. Words and languages, they're cool. And in this, one can see that the use of starch and smooth collars is very old. And he continued, how wretched is the well-born man who nurtures his honor by eating badly, behind a closed door, playing the hypocrite with the toothpick he wields when he goes out after not having eaten anything that would oblige him to clean his teeth. And there is a note after oblige him to clean his teeth, and it says, the image of the impoverished gentleman who picks his teeth so that everyone will think he has eaten appeared in the anonymous Lazarillo de Tormes, 1554, the first picturesque novel, which I believe is a recommendation by Wadsworth to read in the future, so that's kind of fun. How wretched is he, I say, who is apprehensive about his honor, and thinks that the patch on his shoe, the perspiration on his hat, the darn on his cape, and the hunger in his stomach can be seen from a league away. Moog. Words and languages are cool. Me. Word. Wadsworth, enjoy your alert. All this was repeated in Don Quixote's thoughts when those stitches tore, but he was consoled at seeing that Sancho had left him a pair of high traveling boots that he intended to wear the next day. Finally he lay down, pensive and melancholy, not only because he missed Sancho, but on account of the irreparable disaster of his stockings, which he would have stitched up, even with silk thread of another color, one of the greatest indications of poverty that a gentleman can give in the course of his wearisome penury. He put out the candles. It was hot, and he could not sleep. He got out of bed and opened slightly a jalousied window that overlooked a beautiful garden. And when he opened it, he perceived and heard people walking and talking in the garden. He began to listen attentively. Those below him spoke loudly enough for him to hear these words. "Do not urge me, oh, Emerencia, to sing, for you know that since the moment the stranger entered this castle and my eyes looked upon him, I can no longer sing, but only weep. And besides, my lady is more a light sleeper than a heavy one, and I would not want her to find us here for all the riches in the world. And even if she slept and did not awaken, my song would be in vain in this second Aeneas, who has come to my realm only to scorn me and abandon me, should sleep and not awaken. Do not be concerned about that, Altisidora, my friend," was the reply, "for undoubtedly the Duchess and all those in the house are asleep, except for the lord of your heart and the inspiration of your soul. For just now I heard the jalousied window in his room being opened, and no doubt he must be awake. Sing, my suffering friend, softly and quietly to the sound of your harp, and if the Duchess hears us, we can blame the heat." "Oh, Emerencia, that isn't the point," responded Altisidora. "If you're looking for names of pets, children, it's the place to go if you're running out of options. It's just that I wouldn't want to reveal my heart and my song, or be judged a capricious and frivolous maiden by those who do not know the power and might of love. But come what may, an embarrassed face is better than a wounded heart." And then he heard the sound of a harp, played very softly. When he heard this, Don Quixote was dumbfounded, because at that instant he remembered an infinite number of adventures similar to this one, the windows, jealousies, gardens, music, amorous compliments, and swoons, which he had read in his delusive books of chivalry. Then he imagined that a maiden of the Duchess was in love with him, and that modesty compelled her to keep her desire secret. He feared he might surrender, and resolved not to allow himself to be vanquished, and commending himself with all his heart and soul to his lady Dulcinea of Toboso, he decided to listen to the music, to let it be known that he was there. He gave a mock sneeze, which brought no small delight to the maidens, whose sole desire was that Don Quixote should hear them. When she had tuned and adjusted the harp, Altisidora began to sing this ballad. "O you, who lay in your bed, between sheets of Holland linen, soundly and deeply asleep, all night long until the morning, O brave knight, the most courageous, ever born in great La Mancha, more modest, more chaste, more blessed than the fine gold of Arabia. Hear this melancholy maiden, so well born and so ill-fated. In the light of your 2 suns, she feels her soul burst into flames. You go in search of adventures, but find the sorrows of others, inflicting wounds, yet refusing the remedy that can cure them. Oh, tell me, most valiant youth, may God make your wishes prosper. If Libyan sands were your home, or the craggy peaks of Haka, if you suckled a serpent's milk, or by chance you had for nurses the harshness of the wild forest and the horrors of the mountains, well may the fair Dulcinea, a maiden plump and sturdy, boast of subduing a tiger and vanquishing a fierce beast, winning her fame along rivers from Hernes to Harama, from Tahoe to Manzanares, from Pisquerga to Arlanza. If I could change places with her, I would give you my best. Nope. If I could change places with her, I would give my very best. My most gaily colored skirt, adorned with trimmings of gold. Oh, if I were but in your arms, or at least beside your bed, where I could scratch your dear head and shake dandruff from your hair. Gross, why would that be a thing that you want to do? I ask for much, but am not worthy of so notable a boon. I should like to rub your feet. That's enough for a humble maid. Oh, what fine caps I would give you, and oh, what gaiters of silver, and oh, what breeches of damask, and oh, what short capes of linen. Well, that took a turn. We're getting into some like weird fetishy stuff. Let me shake your hair so I can get your dandruff out, and let me touch your feet too. Hey, not gonna yuck your yum. And then the most lustrous pearls, each one as big as a callant, and if they had no companions, they'd be called the only ones. Look not from your Tarpeian rock upon the fire that burns me, Manchangan Nero of the world, nor fan it with cruelty. I am a girl, a tender maid, no more than 15 years old. Girl, calm yourself. I am 14 and 3 months. I swear by God and my soul. I am not lame, I do not limp, I am not deformed or maimed. My hair is like fairest lilies, touching the floor where I stand. And though my mouth is aquiline and my nose is rather blunt, I have teeth of topaz, raising my beauty to a high heaven. My voice, as you'll see, just listen, as sweet as the sweetest tone, and my nature and appearance nothing less than only middling. All these and my other graces are the spoils won by your arrows. I am a maiden of this house. I am called Altisidora. And there are two notes. The first one is after they'd be called the only ones, and that says, the allusion is to a pearl that belongs to the Spanish monarchy. Since it had no equal, it was called La Sola, the only one. And then the next one is after Tarpeian Rock, and it says, according to legend, the place on the Capitoline hill where Nero stood as he watched Rome burn. There you go. This is reminding me a bit of the Song of Solomon. Yeah, it's reminding me of when like children or like when you're by yourself and you're just like singing what you're doing. Like when she started like describing herself, like that's sort of what it reminded me of, like, ooh, gonna open the mail, don't wanna get a paper cut, like that sort of thing. Like just like, I don't know. It seems very off the cuff, and she is just ran out of things to say and is just like, well, I'm not lame and I don't limp, so are you intrigued? Because this is my name. Here, the song of the afflicted Altisidora came to an end, and here began the astonishment of the fervently wooed Don Quixote. Now we know that Moog sings to herself like that. What? No. It's when you're by yourself. I'm sorry, what? Who heaved a great sigh and said to himself, why must I be so unfortunate a knight that no maiden can look upon me without falling in love? Why must the peerless Dulcinea of Toboso be so unlucky that she cannot be permitted to enjoy my incomparable firmness of purpose? O queens, What do you wish of her? O empresses, why do you pursue her? O maidens of 14 to 15 years old, why do you harass her? Oh, allow her, allow the wretched lady to triumph and delight and take pride in the good fortune that love wished to grant her by giving her my heart and presenting her with my soul. Remember, all you enamored ladies, that for Dulcinea alone I am as soft as sugar paste, and for all the rest I am as hard as flint. For her I am honey, and for you bitter aloe. For me, only Dulcinea is beautiful, wise, modest, gallant, and well born, and the rest are ugly, foolish, licentious. We're gonna pretend I said that word right the first time. And of the worst lineage. To be hers alone and no others, nature cast me into the world. Let Altisidora weep or sing. Let the lady despair on whose account I was beaten in the castle of the enchanted Moor. For I must belong to Dulcinea, boiled or roasted, clean, well born, and chaste, despite all the powers of sorcery in the world. And with this he slammed the windows shut, and as indignant and sorrowful as if some calamity had befallen him, he lay down in his bed, where he shall leave him for now, because we are being summoned by the great Sancho Panza, who wishes to begin his famous governorship. That is the end of chapter 44. Exactly. Oh, please enjoy my incomparable firmness of purpose. Twilight Stone, hello. And you thought your pickup lines were silly. Impossible. Hard as flint, your mental replay was, come again? Amazing star. Amazing. So suggestive. I love that Don Quixote is like, I'm just too manly. This curse that I have where every woman that I meet just wants to be with me, but no woman can compare to the incomparable Dulcinea of Toboso, who is not real. It's just so silly. It's so silly, and I love it. And also, I love that at the beginning, was the beginning of this chapter, I think it was. There was like a little, not a warning, but like a strap in, it's gonna be funny type of a thing. Like, just you wait. You will laugh. And if you don't, you will smile. And let's just say I both laughed and smiled, so right you were, Cervantes. You wish that you hadn't that problem. Well, not really. That'd be way too much attention. Yeah, yeah. It seems like, I feel like that's a thing that I've seen where like somebody wishes that they were just like something, like got the attention of all the women or whatever it was, and then it was like ended up to be too much. I don't know. I may or may not have made that up. It's hard to say. It's hard to say up here. And by up here, I mean up here. Or on this chair. It's hard to say up on this chair. I don't know. Okay. So silly, and I'm loving every second. Okay. Chapter 45. Also, let it be known, we're on page 746, which means we are less than 200 pages from finishing. What? Is there an end to this story? I don't know. Okay, good. Twilight Zone, thank you. That helps. Hi. Exactly, exactly. All right, chapter 45. Regarding how the great Sancho Panza took possession of his insula and the manner in which he began to govern. Are we ready for this? On perpetual disclosure of the antipodes, torch of the world, eye of heaven, sweet movement of cooling decanters, here Thymbraeus, there Phoebus, here an archer, there a healer. We already have a note. And the first note is after the sweet movement of cooling decanters, and it says, the invocation is to the sun, whose rays make it necessary to move decanters around in a bucket of snow to keep them cool. Here you go. The more you know. Father of poetry, inventor of music, you who always rise and never set, although you seem to. We have a note. After inventor of music, it says, there are some appellations of Apollo, god of the sun. To you I say, O sun, with whose help man engenders man, to you I say that you ought to favor me and illuminate the dimness of my wits, so that they may touch upon every point in the narration of the governorship of the great Sancho Panza. For without you I feel weak, faint-hearted, and confused. And of course there's another note. One note per sentence so far. It is after, to you I say, O sun, with whose help man engenders man, and it says a phrase from Aristotle's Physics, second, 2. I say, then, that with all his retinue, Sancho came to a village with some 1,000 inhabitants, which was one of the best owned by the Duke. They gave him to understand that it was called the Insula Barataria, either because the village was named Baratario, or because he had been given the governorship at so little cost. There's a note. 4 sentences, 4 notes. You know how this goes. And, oh, I lied. This was the 5th sentence. Excuse me. There's a note right after that sentence, so with little cost, and it says, the name of the insula of the village and the fact that Sancho did nothing to merit the governorship are based on the root word barato, which means cheap. When they reached the gates, for it was walled town, the village councilman came out to receive him. The bells were rung, and the inhabitants displayed general rejoicing, and with a good deal of pomp they brought him to the largest church to give their thanks to God, and then, in a ridiculous ceremony, they presented him with the keys to the village and accepted him as perpetual governor of the Insula Baratalia. The clothing, beard, plumpness, and short stature of the new governor surprised all the people who were not privy to the secret, and even all of the many people who were. Finally, they led him from the church and brought him to the judge's seat in a courtroom, and seated him upon it, and the duke's steward said to him, it is an ancient custom on this insula, Signor Governor, that the man who comes to take possession of this famous insula is obliged to respond to a question that is somewhat intricate and complicated, and from his response the people can weigh and measure the intelligence of their new governor, and either celebrate or mourn his arrival. While the steward was telling this to Sancho, Sancho was looking at a number of large letters written on the wall facing his seat, and since he did not know how to read, he asked what was painted there on the wall, and the response was, Signor, the day on which your lordship took possession of this insula is written and noted, and the inscription says, today, on such and such a day, in such a year, Signor, Don Sancho Panza took possession of this insula, and may he enjoy it for many years. And who are you calling Don Sancho Panza? Asked Sancho. Your lordship, responded the steward, for no other Panza has come to this insula except the one sitting on that seat. Well, you should know, brother, said Sancho, that I don't have a Don, and neither did anybody else in my family. My name's Sancho Panza, plain and simple, and my father was named Sancho, and my grandfather was named Sancho, and they were all Panzas, without any additions or Don or Doña. I imagine that on this insula there must be more Dons than stones, but that's enough of that. God understands me, and it may be that if my governorship lasts a few days, I'll weed out those Dons, because there's so many of them, they must be as annoying as gnats. Go on with your question, Senor Steward, and I'll answer the best I can, whether the people go into mourning or not. At that moment, two men entered the courtroom, one wearing the clothes of a peasant, and the other dressed as a tailor, for he carried a pair of scissors in his hand, and the tailor said, Senor Governor, I and this peasant have come before your grace because this good man came to my shop yesterday, for I, if those present will excuse me, have passed the tailor's examination, God be praised, placed a piece of cloth in my hands and said, Senor, is there enough cloth here to make me a pointed cap? I examined the cloth and told him there was. He must have thought, which is what I thought, and thought correctly, that I surely wanted to steal a part of the cloth, basing this on his own wickedness and on the bad reputation of tailors. And he told me to see if there was enough for two. I guessed at what he was thinking, and I told him yes, and he, still riding his earlier wicked intention, kept adding caps, and I kept adding yeses, until we reached 5 caps, and now he just came for them, and I gave them to him, and he refuses to pay me for my labor, but demands that I pay him or return his cloth. There is a note all the way up after Taylor's examination, and it says, in other words, he has been admitted to the Tailors' Guild. He asks to be excused because at the time tailors were held in exceptionally bad repute. Interesting. It's a fun note. Is this all true, brother? Asked Sancho. Yes, senor, responded the peasant. Would your grace should have him show you the 5 caps he made for me. Gladly, responded the tailor. Then, taking his hand out from under his cloak, he showed 5 caps placed on the 5 fingertips of his hand, and he said, Here are the 5 caps this good man asked me for, and by God and my conscience I had no cloth left over, and I'll even show the work to the guild inspectors. Everyone present laughed at the multitude of caps and the unusual nature of the case. Sancho reflected for a while and said, It seems to me that in this case there's no need for long delays, for it can be judged quickly by the judgment of a sensible man, and so my verdict is that the tailor should lose the cost of his labor, and the peasant his cloth, and the cap should be taken to the prisoners in jail, and that's the end of that. If the subsequent verdict concerning the herder's purse moved the onlookers to amazement, this one provoked their laughter. But in the end the governor's orders were carried out. The next to come before him were 2 old men. One carried a length of cane as a walking stick, and the other, without a walking stick, said, Senor, days ago I lent this good man 10 gold escudos as a kindness and a favor to him, on the condition that he return them to me whenever I asked for them. A good number of days went by without my asking for anything, so that his repayment would not put him in even greater difficulties than when I lent him the money. But because it seemed to me that he was negligent about his debt, I have asked him for repayment over and over again, and not only does he not return my money, but he denies the debt, and says I never lent him 10 escudos, and if I did, He's already returned them to me. There are no witnesses to the loan or to the repayment, because he never repaid me. I would like your grace to take his oath, and if he swears that he's returned the money, I'll forgive the debt here, before God." "What do you say to this old man with the walking stick?" said Sancho. To which the old man said, "Señor, I confess that he lent me the money, and your grace should lower your staff. And since he leaves it up to my oath, I'll swear that I have really and truly returned the money and paid the debt." And there's a note after lower your staff. It says, "The judge's staff of office was used to take sworn enemies." Oh my gosh. You can tell what type of mindset I have. The judge's staff of office was used to take sworn testimonies, not enemies. That would be a completely different thing. Using staffs to take out sworn enemies? Yes. Yes, please. The governor lowered his staff, and at the same time, as if it were very much in his way, the old man with the walking stick gave his walking stick to the other man for him to hold while he took his oath, and then he placed his hand on the cross of the staff, saying it was true that the 10 escudos had been lent to him, but that he had paid them into the hands of the other man, who was forgetful and kept asking him for the money. Seeing which, the great governor asked the creditor to respond to what his adversary had said, and he said that without any doubt his debtor must be telling the truth, because he considered him an honest man and a good Christian, and he must have forgotten how and when he had returned the money, and from now on he would not ask him for anything. The debtor took back his walking stick, bowed his head, and left the courtroom. Sancho, seeing him walk out with no further ado, and seeing too the patience of the claimant, lowered his head to his chest, placed the index finger of his right hand over his eyebrows and nose, sat thoughtfully for a short while, and then raised his head and ordered them call back the old man with the walking stick, who had already left. They brought him back, and when he saw him, Sancho said, "Good man, give me that walking stick. I need it." "Gladly," responded the old man. "Here it is, señor." And he placed it in his hand. Sancho took it, gave it to the other old man, and said, "Go with God, for you have been repaid." "I, señor," responded the old man. "Then is this length of cane worth 10 gold escudos?" "Yes," said the governor, "and if not, then I'm begging the biggest imbecile in the world." "I'm not begging the biggest imbecile." Oi, I'm just adding words now. "And if not, then I'm the biggest imbecile in the world, and now we'll see if I have the brains to govern a whole kingdom." And he ordered that there, in front of everyone, the cane should be broken and opened. It was, and in the very center 10 gold escudos were discovered. Everyone was stunned, and they considered their governor to be a second Solomon. They asked him how he had deduced the 10 escudos were inside the cane. He responded that when he had seen the old man who was taking the oath giving the walking stick to his adversary to hold while he swore his oath, and then swear that he had really and truly given him the money, and then, when he had finished his oath, ask for his walking stick back again, it occurred to him that the money he was being asked for was inside the cane. From which one can deduce that those who govern, even if they are fools, are occasionally guided by God in their judgments. Besides, he had heard the priest in his village tell about another case like this one, and he had such a good memory that if he didn't forget anything he wanted to remember, there wouldn't be another memory like it in all the insula. And there is a note after he had heard another story about another case like this, and it says, "The story, in fact, dates back to the popular life of the saints called the Golden Legend." by the Italian Dominican Iacopo de Varese. 1228, question mark? 1298. Finally, with one old man mortified and the other repaid, they left, and those present were astounded, and the man writing down the words, deeds, and movements of Sancho could not determine if he should record him as a fool or as a wise man. Then, when his case was concluded, a woman entered the courtroom, clutching at a man dressed in the clothes of a rich herder, and as she came in she cried out, "Justice, Senor Governor, justice, and if I don't find it on earth, I'll go and look for it in heaven. Senor Governor of my soul, this wicked man seized me in the middle of a field and used my body like a dirty old rag, and oh, woe is me, he took what I had safeguarded for more than 23 years, defending it against Moors and Christians, Spaniards and foreigners, and I, always as hard as an oak, kept myself pure like the salamander in the fire, or wool in the brambles, just so this good man would come along now and put his clean hands all over me." "There's something we have to look into, whether or not this fine fellow has clean hands," said Sancho. And turning to the man, he told him to answer and respond to the complaint of this woman. The man, greatly agitated, responded, "Senores, I am a poor herder of swine, and this morning I left here to sell, you'll forgive me saying so, 4 pigs, and what with taxes and trickery, I let them go for a little less than what they were worth. I was returning to my village. I met this good woman on the way, and the devil, who was always cooking up trouble, made us lie down together." Something doesn't add up in this story. "I paid her enough. She wasn't satisfied. She caught hold of me and didn't let go until she brought me here. She says I forced her, and she lies. By the oath I swear or plan to swear, this is the whole truth, down to the last crumb." And the governor asked him if he was carrying any silver coins. He said he had about 20 ducados inside his shirt in a leather purse. The governor ordered him to take it out and give it, just as it was, to the plaintiff. He did so, trembling. The woman took it, making 1,000 obeisance to everyone and praying to God for the life and health of the governor who took such good care of orphans and maidens in need. And with that, she left the courtroom, tightly clutching the purse with both hands, although first she looked to see if the coins were silver. "Duddy, so good to see you. Hello." As soon as she left, Sancho said to the herder, who was already in tears and whose eyes and heart were following after his purse, "My good man, go after that woman and take the purse away from her, even if she doesn't want to give it to you, and bring it back here." Oh, Sancho was saying that. "My mistake. Wrong voice. Oopsie boopsie." And he did not say this to a fool or a deaf man, because the herder ran out like a bolt of lightning to do as he had been ordered. Everyone present was in suspense, waiting to see how the case would end, and in a little while the man and the woman returned, holding and clutching each other more tightly than before, she with her skirt tucked up, with the purse thrust inside, and the man struggling to take it away from her, which was not possible because the woman defended it so fiercely and cried out, saying, "Justice, God's justice and the world's, look, your grace, Senor Governor, at how shameless and bold this cruel man is, for in the middle of town and in the middle of the street he has tried to take the purse that your grace ordered him to give to me." "And did he take it from you?" asked the governor. "What do you mean, take?" responded the woman. "I'd let them take my life before I let them take my purse. Not this girl. You'd have to send someone else after me, not this miserable weakling. Tongs and hammers, mallets and chisels, not even a lion's claws would be enough to tear it out of my hands. First, they'd have to get the soul from the very heart of my body." "She's right," said the man, "and I'm worn out and confess I don't have the strength to take it from her. I give up." Then the governor said to the woman, "Honorable and valiant woman, show me your purse." She gave it to him immediately, and the governor returned it to the man and said to the forceful and unforced woman, "If, my dear sister, you had shown the same strength and courage, or even half as much in defending your body as you—" Oh, I don't like this. I don't like this at all. I'm gonna read it, and then I'm gonna be mad, and we're gonna discuss why I'm upset, and probably why you're upset. "If, my dear sister, you had shown the same strength and courage, or even half as much, in defending your body as you showed in defending that purse, the strength of Hercules could not have forced you. Go with God and a good amount of bad luck, and don't stop anywhere on this insula or for 6 leagues around it, under penalty of 200 lashes. Leave now, I say, you charlatan and brazen liar." The woman was frightened and left, dejected and discontented. And the governor said to the man, "My good man, go with God to your home and with your money. And from now on, if you don't want to lose it, try to hold off your desire to lie with everybody." To lie with anybody. The man thanked him in the worst way he knew how and left. And the onlookers were again amazed at the judgments and verdicts of their new governor. There's a note right after new governor, and it says, "This story appears in Norte de los Estados by Friar Francisco de Osuna, Burgos, 1550. All of which, noted by his chronicler, was then written down and sent to the Duke, who was eagerly awaiting it. And let us leave the good Sancho here, for we must quickly return to his master, who has been so disquieted by the music of Altisidora. End of chapter 45. Okay, so now we have left Don Quixote, who has thrown himself to the bed because he's just far too good looking and everybody wants him. And we now have Sancho, who has been welcomed into this town as the new governor, and he has already started hearing cases and disputes, and it is expected of him to resolve them. But they are all disputes that are known, that are famous and have been recorded, and Sancho knows them. So he's able to sort of figure out like where the money is, like who's actually at fault, like that sort of thing. And it's just interesting like seeing Sancho being like really smart and the people being like, "How does he know this? This is amazing." Like he's so clever, he's so smart. I am not a fan of the last one. Gotta say. Gotta say that I am not a fan of the last one, of the woman and the guy. I just don't like it. Something just like rubs me the wrong way with that one. But here we are now. So now we're gonna leave Sancho. It is interesting having Don Quixote and Sancho separate, and then just alternating between them of like what's going on with them, what's happening. They're both prone to being in weird situations. So let's split them up and see all of the weird situations that they could possibly find themselves in. Dottie, yes. So Sancho has now been granted an insula by the Duke and the Duchess. So he is now the governor of this little village. But the Duke and Duchess have told lots of people in the village like about the deception that they're in on. So he's not like really the governor. They're just like messing with him a bit. And then to mess with Don Quixote, late at night, they have one of the maidens singing a song and ensuring that Don Quixote would be able to hear it. And she's singing about how much she loves Don Quixote and how happy she would be if they could be together. And Don Quixote is just like in shambles because everybody just loves him, every maiden, every empress, every queen, and he just he can only be with Dulcinea. And woe is him, this curse that he has. So those are the two situations that we have found ourselves in, and they are separated right now. So Don Quixote is still with the Duke and Duchess at their castle. Wild. The lady's purse case. Let me just tell you everything about this book, but not the one that you specifically asked for. Sorry. No, that was totally my bad. So, uh, um, he's listening. So Sancho is listening to these different cases, and the last case, the case with the lady in her purse, she is running in, like grabbing at a guy and just saying like, he has like, I am a pure angel and he has sullied me and he is just, I was just working and he has attacked me and now he has taken all of my money, that sort of thing. And the guy is saying, no, that's not what happened at all. Like, I'm just a pig herder and I was leaving the village and like somehow the devil made it happen that we should lie together and I paid her, but apparently it wasn't enough and now she's like really mad at me. And so it turns out that the guy was correct, that she wasn't taken advantage of, that she was just out for his money and wanted more money. So yeah, and to prove that um Don Quixote, Sancho gave um the man's purse to her and she left and then was like, all right, dude, you need to run out and I want you to grab that purse from her. And so he runs out and he can't do it. Like she's just far too strong. And then Sancho is like, if you were this strong with just a purse and not with your body, like it was just not amazing. Not amazing. Yeah. So so that's what it was. He wasn't strong enough to take the purse away. So it couldn't possibly that he was strong enough to take advantage of her. Yeah, of course. Okay. It's pretty yuck. Yeah. Chapter 46. Okay, now we're going back to Don Quixote. Regarding the dreadful malign and feline fright received by Don Quixote in the course of his wooing by the enamored Altisidora. We left the great Don Quixote wrapped in the thoughts that had been caused by the music of the enamored maiden Altisidora. He lay down with them, and, as if they were fleas, they would not let him sleep or rest for a moment, and they joined the ones that plagued him with regard to his stockings. But since time is swift, and there is no obstacle that can stop it, the hours raced by, and morning soon arrived. Seeing which Don Quixote left the soft feather bed, and, by no means slothful, dressed in his chamois outfit, and put on the travelling boots in order to hide the misfortune of his stockings. He threw on his scarlet cloak, and on his head he placed a cap of green velvet adorned with silver trimmings. Over his shoulders he hung his sword belt, with his good sharp blade, picked up a large rosary that he always carried with him, and with great solemnity strode into the antechamber, where the Duke and the Duchess were already dressed, and apparently waiting for him. And as he passed along the gallery, standing there waiting for him were Altisidora and another maiden. And as soon as Altisidora saw Don Quixote, she pretended to faint, and her friend held her in her lap and very quickly began to unfasten her bodice. Don Quixote saw this, and going up to them, he said, "I know the reason for this mishap." "I don't know what it could be," responded the friend, "because Altisidora is the healthiest maiden in the entire house, and I've never heard of even a sigh from her for as long as I've known her. Bad luck to all the knight-errants in the world if they're so ungrateful. Your Grace should leave, Señor Don Quixote, for this young girl won't regain consciousness as long as your Grace is here." To which Don Quixote responded, "Señora, your Grace should have a lute placed in my room tonight, and I shall do my best to console this suffering maiden, for at the very beginnings of love, rapid disillusionments are usually considered remedies." Eliam, thank you so much for the follow. Welcome in. And with this he left, so that he would not attract the attention of anyone who might see him. No sooner had he gone away than the swooning Altisidora came to her senses, and said to her companion, "A lute will have to be placed in this room. No doubt Don Quixote wants to give us some music, and if it's his, it won't be bad." They went immediately to the Duchess to recount what had happened, and to tell her about the lute that Don Quixote had requested, and she, with extraordinary pleasure, arranged with the Duke and her maidens to play a trick more amusing than harmful, and very happily they waited for the night, which came as quickly as the day, which the Duke and Duchess spent in delightful conversation with Don Quixote. At that same day, the Duchess really and truly dispatched a page, the one who had played the enchanted figure of Dulcinea in the forest, to Teresa Panza, with a letter from her husband, Sancho Panza, and the bundle of clothing he had left behind so that it could be sent to her, and she charged him to bring back a good accounting of everything that passed between them. Later, when it was 11 o'clock, Don Quixote found a vihuela in his room. He tested it, opened the jalousied window, and heard people walking in the garden, turning the pegs of the vihuela, and tuning it the best he knew how. He spat and cleared his throat, and then in a voice that was husky, but in tune, he sang the following ballad, which he had composed that day. Often the power of love can madden a maiden's soul, using as its means its instrument, in unthinking leisure and ease. Fine sewing and needlework, constant devotion to labor, can be the cure, the antidote. So the poison of love's disease. For sheltered and modest maidens who aspire to be married, chastity is the best dowry, the best voice to sing their praises. Knights-errant who seek adventures, and those knights who stay at court, woo the free and easy damsels. They marry the modest maids. Love can arise in the east, and be confirmed between guests, and sink quickly in the west, because departure is its end. Love that is recent and new, that comes today and goes the next, leaves no image, makes no mark that endures deep in the soul. A picture over a picture that is not disclosed, nor is it shown, and where a first beauty exists, a second won't win the game. Dulcinea of Toboso, she is painted on my soul's tabula rasa, and never can she ever be erased. Firm constancy in lovers is a most precious attribute, for whose sake love works miracles when he raises them on high. Well, I hate all of this. Yeah. Don Quixote had reached this point in his song, to which the Duke and the Duchess Altisidora and almost all the people in the castle were listening, when suddenly, from a gallery that was directly above Don Quixote's jalousied window, a cord was lowered with more than 100 cowbells attached to it, and immediately after that, a huge sack full of cats. That is what it says. Okay. All right. A huge sack full of cats with smaller bells tied to their tails were emptied out. The clanging of the bells and the yowling of the cats was so loud that even though the Duke and Duchess had contrived the joke, it still startled them, and Don Quixote was struck dumb with fear. As luck would have it, 2 or 3 of the cats came in the window of his room, and as they raced from one side to the other, it seemed as if a legion of devils had been set loose in the chamber. They made the candles that were burning in the room go out as they looked for a means of escape. The raising and lowering of the cord with large cowbells on it did not stop. Most of the people in the castle, who did not know the truth of what had happened, were amazed and astonished. Needs more cowbell, yeah. So, the Duke and the Duchess, when we first met them, and they brought Don Quixote and Sancho into their home and started just telling all of their maids and everybody to pretend to go along and just treat them like knight-errant and squire. I was like, okay, like that's fine, that's good. And then and then and then the jokes just keep coming and the deceptions just keep happening, and I don't like it. I don't like it at all. If I thought it was just you thing, I would suggest we finish the book. We do a watch party of the cartoon Don Quixote and Sancho Panda and rate how accurate it is. Oh, in my head, Duddy, I read it as your thing, and I think I just I read it as is. Oops. Don't worry, my thumb was holding the place. Good gosh, that would have been tragic. You know what? We might need to do that actually. Sunday stream? Maybe we can throw that into Sunday stream because that actually does sound really fun. We'll see. We'll see. That's a good idea. And of course, I lost my page. Okay, I found it. Oh, that's fine. You're good. The raising and lowering of the cord with the large cowbells on it did not stop. Most of the people in the castle who did not know the truth of what had happened were amazed and astonished. Don Quixote rose to his feet, took his sword in hand, and began to thrust it through the jalousie, shouting, "Away, evil enchanters! Away, base wizards! For I am Don Quixote of the Mancha, against whom your wicked intentions are powerless and of little use." And turning to the cats that were racing around the room, he directed many thrusts against them. They ran to the window and went out, although one of them, finding himself so hounded by Don Quixote's sword thrusts, leaped at his face and sank his claws and teeth into his nose, and the pain was so great that Don Quixote began to shout as loudly as he could. Danemon, thank you so much for the follow. Hello, welcome in. Beast wizards. Yes. The Duke and Duchess heard this, and considering what it might be, they quickly hurried to his room, and opening the door with a master key, they saw the poor knight struggling with all his might to remove the cat from his face. They came in with lights and saw the unequal battle. The Duke attempted to separate them, and Don Quixote shouted, "No one is to pull them away. Let me fight hand to hand with this demon, this wizard, this enchanter, for I shall teach him, 1-to-1, who Don Quixote of La Mancha is." But the cat, caring nothing for these threats, snarled and dug in even deeper. At last the Duke uprooted him and tossed him out the window. "You're from La Mancha! Oh, amazing! Welcome in." You may or may not be a little familiar with this. That's so fun. Don Quixote's face was covered with scratches, and his nose was not very healthy, and he was very indignant because he had not been allowed to finish the battle he had begun with that wicked enchanter. Oil of Aparicio was sent for, and Altisidora herself, with her snow-white hands, put bandages over all his wounds, and as she did, in a low voice, she said, "All these misfortunes have occurred, O hard-hearted knight, because of the sin of your harshness and obstinacy. May it please God that Sancho your squire forgets to flog himself, so that your dearly beloved Dulcinea never is released from her enchantment, and you never enjoy her, or come to your nuptial bed with her, at least as long as I live, for I adore you." Just coming on a little strong. It's a little intense. And there is a note after Aparicio, and it says, "A medicinal preparation for entreating wounds, devised in the 16th century by Aparicio de Zubia." You can't walk 2 feet here without a Don Quixote stuff. Yes. But you love the book. That's good. At least it's not something that you hate and you keep getting reminded about it. To all of this, Don Quixote did not respond except to heave a deep sigh, and then he lay down on his bed, thanking the Duke and the Duchess for their kindness, not because he had been afraid of that enchanted feline and beeline horde, but because he had realized the good intentions with which they had come to his assistance. The Duke and Duchess allowed him to rest and left, saddened by the unfortunate outcome of their joke, but they did not believe that the adventure would turn out to be so painful and costly for Don Quixote, who had to spend 5 days confined to his bed, where another adventure befell him that was more pleasant than the last one, which his historian does not wish to recount now, in order to return to Sancho Panza, who was proceeding very diligently and very comically in his governorship. End of chapter 46. All right, so the Duke and Duchess are still messing with him, and they decide that they are just going to cause chaos with a bunch of bells and a bunch of cats and just make it as loud as humanly possible. And they thought it would just be super, super funny, not hurt anybody. And then it turned out that it did. It very much hurt to have cats clawing at Don Quixote, because he's trying to get them away, of course. So cool. And I'm wondering if this means that the like pranks that are going to be in the future are going to be less mean, if that makes sense. I don't know. I don't really know. I don't know what it's going to take for Don Quixote to leave, or for the Duke and Duchess to just be like, sorry. Sorry about it. I don't know. Okay, but enough of Don Quixote. Let's go see what Sancho is doing. Chapter 47, in which the account of Sancho Panza behaved in his governorship continues. The history recounts that Sancho Panza was taken from the courtroom to a sumptuous palace, where, in a large hall, a royal and extremely clean table was set. As soon as Sancho entered the hall, there was a sound of flageolets, and 4 pages came out with water to wash his hands, which Sancho received with great solemnity. The music ceased, and Sancho sat down at the head of the table, because that was the only chair and the only place laid on the entire table. A personage, who later proved to be a physician, came to stand at his side, holding a rod of whalebone in his hand. They lifted the fine white cloth that covered the fruit, and a wide variety of dishes holding different foods. One man, who looked like a student, said the blessing, and a page put a bib trimmed in lace on Sancho. Another, who was performing the duties of a butler, placed a dish of fruit in front of him. He had barely eaten a mouthful when the man with the rod used it to touch the dish, and it was taken away with extraordinary speed. But the butler placed another dish of different food in front of him. Sancho was about to try it, but before he could reach it and taste it, the rod had touched it, and a page removed it as quickly as the fruit had been taken away. When he saw this, Sancho was perplexed, and looking at everyone, he asked if the dinner was to be eaten like a conjuring trick, to which the man with the rod responded, "It must be eaten, Señor Governor, according to the traditions and customs of other insulas where there are governors. I, Señor, am the physician, and on this insula I am paid to tend to its governors, and I care for their health much more than I do of my own, studying day and night and observing the governor's constitution and temperament in order to successfully cure him if he should fall ill. And the principal thing I do is to be present at his dinners and suppers, and allow him to eat what seems appropriate to me, and to take away what I imagine will do him harm and be injurious to his stomach. And so I ordered the dish of the fruit removed because it was too damp, and the other dish as well because it was too hot, and had a good number of spices which increase thirst, and if one drinks too much, one destroys and consumes the radical humor, which is to say, life." And there is a note right there, and it says, "The physician's medical theorizing is based on the idea of the four cardinal humors." It's just Sancho being Sancho. Exactly, exactly. Noodles, so good to see you. Hello, hi. So, I'm actually really enjoying this. I think it's so funny. I'm just imagining him at like an extremely long table, and food is coming, and somebody just immediately being like, "You can't have that. No, no. The fruit is too damp. You mustn't eat it." Like, that's just so funny and so silly. Okay, here we go. "So that means that the dish of roasted partridges over there, nicely seasoned to me, won't do me any harm?" To which the physician responded, "The governor will not eat them as long as I am alive." "But why?" said Sancho. And the physician responded, "Because our master Hippocrates, Polestar and light of medicine, says in one of the aphorisms, Omnis saturado mala, perdicis autem pessima, which means, a full stomach is bad, but a stomach full of partridges is very bad." And there is a note after that, and it says, "A parody of the aphorism Omnis saturata mala panis autem pessima, i.e., bread instead of partridges." "If that's true," said Sancho, "then see, Señor Doctor, which of the dishes on this table will do me the most good and which the least harm, and let me eat it without you tapping it, because by my life as a governor, and may God allow me to enjoy it, I am dying of hunger, and denying me food, no matter what you tell me, Señor Doctor, means taking my life instead of lengthening it." "Your grace is correct, Señor Governor," responded the physician, "and so it is my opinion that your grace should not eat the rabbit's stew over there, because that is a long-haired animal. You could have tasted the veal if it hadn't been roasted and marinated, but it's out of the question now." And Sancho said, "That big bowl steaming over there looks okay to me. Oh wait, no, that's not what he says at all. Hold on. That big bowl steaming over there looks to me like olla podrida." And because those stews have so many different kinds of things in them, I can't help but come across something that I'll like, and this will be good for me. And there is a note after that fun stew name, and it says, a traditional Spanish stew that includes chickpeas, ham, and chicken, in addition to the usual meats and vegetables ordinarily found in stew. Absit, said the physician. There's a note. Absit. It says, by no means, in Latin. May so wicked a thought be far from us. There is nothing in the world less nourishing than an olla podrida. Let it be for canons or rectors of colleges or peasant weddings, and keep them away from the tables of governors, where all things exquisite and elegant should be present. The reason is that simple medicines are always more highly esteemed than compounded ones, everywhere and by everyone, because there can be no error in simple medicines, but there can be in compound ones, simply by changing the amounts of the things of which they are compounded. But I know that what the governor must eat now in order to preserve and fortify his health is 100 rolled wafers and some very thin slices of quince, which will settle his stomach and help his digestion. Hearing this, Sancho leaned back in his chair and stared fixedly at the physician, and in a solemn voice asked him what his name was, and where he said he had studied, to which he responded, my name, Senor Governor, is Dr. Pedro Recio de Agüero, and I am a native of a town called, oh my gosh, Terteafuera, which is between Caracuel and Almodovar del Campo, on the right-hand side, and I hold the degree of doctor from the University of Osuna. There's a note after University of Osuna, and it says, where are we? Oh, there we go. Recio means vigorous, violent, or difficult. Agüero means omen, and tirtea fuera is roughly equivalent to get the hell out. That's pretty funny. These, like, okay. To which Sancho, in a rage, responded, well, Senor Doctor Pedro Recio de Malaguera, native of Tirteafuera, a village that's on the right as we go to the Caracuel to Almodovar del Campo, graduate from Osuna. Get out of my sight, and if you don't, I swear by the sun that I'll take the cudgel and, starting with you, I'll beat all the doctors so hard there won't be a single one left anywhere in the insula, at least the ones I know to be ignorant, because wise, prudent, and intelligent doctors I respect and honor as if they were divine. And there was a note after Mal Agüero, and it says, evil omen. And again, I say that you should leave here, Pedro Recio. Otherwise, I'll take this chair that I'm sitting on and smash it over your head, and they can bring charges against me, and I'll clear myself by saying that I did a service for God when I killed a bad doctor, who's the same as an executioner. Now, all of you, give me something to eat, otherwise take your governorship back, because an office that doesn't give a man food to eat isn't worth 2 beans. The physician became very agitated when he saw the governor so enraged, and he wanted to do a tira fuera from the hall, but at that moment a post horn sounded in the street, and the butler went to look out the window, and then returned, saying, a courtier has come from my lord the duke. He must be carrying an important dispatch. The courier came in, perspiring and intimidated, and after taking a sealed letter from inside his shirt, he placed it in the hands of the governor, and Sancho placed it in those of the steward, whom he ordered to read the address, which read, to Don Sancho Panza, governor of the Insula Barataria, to be delivered into his own hands or those of his secretary. Hearing this, Sancho said, who here is my secretary? And one of those present responded, I am, senor, because I know how to read and write, and because I'm Basque. And there's a note after Basque, and it says, Basques were frequently appointed as secretaries because of their reputation for loyalty. With that little addition, said Sancho, you could be secretary to the emperor himself. Open that letter and see what it says. The newly born secretary did so, and having read what it said it was a matter that required privacy. Sancho ordered the hall cleared, with only the steward and the butler remaining. All the rest, including the physician, left, and then the secretary read the letter, which said, It has come to my attention, Señor Don Sancho Panza, that certain enemies of mine and of the insula will launch a furious attack, but I do not know on which night. It is advisable to keep watch and stay on guard so that they do not catch you unprepared. I have also learned through trusted spies that 4 persons in disguise have come to that place to take your life, for they fear your cleverness. Keep your eyes open, be aware of who comes to speak to you, and do not eat anything that is offered to you. I shall be sure to come to your aid if you find yourself in difficulty, and in everything you will act with your customary intelligence. From this place, the 16th of August, at 4 in the morning. Your friend, the Duke. Sancho was astounded, as all the bystanders seemed to be as well, and turning to the steward he said, What has to be done now, and done right away, is to put Dr. Recio in jail, because if anybody's going to kill me, it'll be him, with a slow, painful death that comes from starvation. It also seems to me, said the butler, that your grace shouldn't eat anything that is on this table because it was prepared by nuns, and as the saying goes, behind the cross lurks the devil. I don't deny it, responded Sancho, and for now give me a piece of bread and about 4 pounds of grapes, because they really can't be poisoned, and I can't get by without eating, and if we have to be ready for those battles that are threatening us, we'll need to be well fed, because a full belly gives you courage and not the other way around. And you, secretary, answer my lord the Duke and tell him that all his orders will be carried out as ordered, to the letter, and send my lady the Duchess a kiss on the hand for me, and say that I beg her not to forget to send a message with my letter and my bundle to my wife, Teresa Panza, and I'll be very grateful, and I'll be sure to serve her to the best of my ability, and while you're at it you can include a kiss on the hand for my master, Don Quixote of La Mancha, so that he can see that I am grateful, and you, like a good secretary and a good Basque, can add anything you want that's to the point. Now clear the table and give me something to eat, and then I'll take on all the spies and killers and enchanters who want to attack me and my insula. At this moment, the page came in and said, There's a farmer here, a petitioner, who wants to talk to your lordship about a matter that he says is very important. It's strange, said Sancho, about these petitions. Is it possible they're so foolish they can't see that this isn't the right time of day to come with their petitions? By some chance, aren't those of us who are governors and judges men of flesh and blood too, and don't we need to have time to rest, or do they think they're made of marble? My God and my conscience, if my governorship lasts, and I have an idea it won't, I'll get these petitioners under control. Now tell this good man to come in, but make sure first that he isn't one of those spies or a killer who wants to murder me. No, senor, responded the page, because he seems a simple soul, and either I don't know much, or he's as good as a piece of bread. There's nothing to fear, said the steward. We're all here. Butler, would it be possible, said Sancho, now that Dr. Pedro Recio isn't here, for me to eat something with a little more weight and substance, even if it's a piece of bread and an onion? Tonight, the supper will make up for the defects in your dinner, and your lordship will be well satisfied and content, said the butler. May God grant us that, responded Sancho. Oh, thank you. I'm trying my best over here. And at this point the farmer came in, a man of very decent appearance, and from 1,000 leagues away one could see that he was honest and a good soul. The first thing he said was, Which one of you is the governor? Who else would it be, responded the secretary, except the one who's sitting on the chair? "Then I humble myself in his presence," said the farmer, and going down on his knees he asked for Sancho's hand to kiss. Sancho refused and ordered him to stand and tell him what he wanted. The farmer complied and said, "We have another tirtea fuera," said Sancho. Oh wait, I totally skipped what the farmer actually said. Let's go back. The farmer complied and said, "Señor, I am a farmer, a native of Miguel Tura, a village 2 leagues from Ciudad Real." "We have another tirtea fuera," said Sancho. "Go on, brother, for I can tell you that I know Miguel Tura very well, and it's not very far from my village." "Well, señor, the fact is," the farmer continued, "that I, by the grace of God, am married with the blessing and consent of the Holy Roman Catholic Church. I have 2 sons who are students. The younger is studying for his bachelor's degree, and the older one for his licentiate. I am a widower because my wife died, or I should say, a bad doctor killed her, purging her when she was pregnant. And if it had been God's will for the child to be born, and if it had been a boy, I would have had him study medicine so he wouldn't be envious of his brothers, the bachelor and the licentiate." "Which means," said Sancho, "that if your wife hadn't died or hadn't been killed, you wouldn't be a widower now." "No, señor, not at all," responded the farmer. "Well, that's a fine thing," replied Sancho. "Go on, brother, because now's the time for sleep, not partitions." "Well, I'll tell you," said the farmer, "that my son, who's studying to be a bachelor, fell in love with a maiden from our village named Clara Pellerina, the daughter of Andres Pellerino, a very rich farmer, and this name of Pellerin doesn't come to them from their ancestry or family, but because everyone in this village is palsied, and to improve the name they're called Pellerin. Though, if truth be told, the maiden is like an oriental pearl, and looked at from the right side, she seems a flower of the field. From the left side, it's a different story, because she lost that eye when she had smallpox, and though she has many large pock marks on her face, those who love her dearly say that those aren't pock marks, but the graves where the souls of her suitors are buried." And there is a note after Pellerin, and it says, "The root perle is related to pearl. The term Cervantes uses for palsied or paralyzed is perlatico, allowing for the wordplay in these lines." She's so clean that in order not to dirty her face, her nose, as they say, is so upturned that it looks like it's running away from her mouth, and still she looks extremely attractive because her mouth is large, and if it weren't missing 10 or 12 teeth, it would be counted and considered as one of the best formed. I have nothing to say about her lips because they're so thin and delicate that if it were usual to wind lips, they would be made into a nice skein, but since their color is different from the one commonly found in lips, they seem miraculous, because they're a mottled blue, green, and purple. And Señor Governor, please forgive me for painting in so much detail the traits of the woman who, in the long run, is going to be my daughter, because I love her dearly and think she's fine. "Paint as much as you like," said Sancho, "because I'm enjoying the picture, and if I'd eaten, there couldn't be a better dessert for me than your portrait." "I still have that to serve to you," responded the farmer, "but a time will come when we're ready for it, if we weren't now. And I say, señor, that if you could paint her elegance and the height of her body, it would be something amazing, but that's impossible, because she's stooped and hunched over, and her mouth is down to her knees, and even so, it's clear to see that if she could stand up, her head would touch the ceiling. She would have given her hand in marriage to my bachelor by now, but she can't extend it because it's withered, and, with it all, by her long grooved nails, you can see how well made and shapely it is." "That's fine," said Sancho. "You should realize, brother, that now you've painted her from head to toe, What is it that you want? And get to the point without beating around the bush or going around in circles or taking anything away or adding anything on. Senor, I would like, responded the farmer, for your grace to be so good as to give me a letter of support for her father, asking him kindly to allow this marriage to take place, for we are not unequal in our fortunes or our natures, to tell you the truth, Senor Governor. My son is possessed, and not a day goes by that evil spirits do not torment him, because he fell once into the fire. His face is as wrinkled as parchment, and his eyes are somewhat teary and runny, but he has the disposition of an angel, and if he didn't beat and punch himself, he would be a saint. Is there anything else you want, my good man? Replied Sancho. I would like something else, said the farmer, except I don't dare to say it. But, well, after all, whether I get it or not, it shouldn't fester inside me. And so, senor, I would like your grace to give me 300 or 600 ducados to help with my bachelor's dowry. I mean, to help him set up a house, because, after all, they have to live on their own and not be subject to the interference of in-laws. See, see if there's anything else you want, said Sancho, and don't be too shy or too embarrassed to say it. No, I'm certain there's nothing else, responded the farmer. And as soon as he said this, the governor rose to his feet, picked up the chair where he had been sitting, and said, I swear, Don Crass and Crude, if you don't leave and get out of my sight right now, I'll break and crack your head open with this chair. Scoundrel and whoresome, the demon's own painter in this the right time to come and ask for 600 ducados? Where would I have them, you unbearable pest, and why would I give them to you if I did have them, you shifty fool? And what do I care about Miguel Tura and the lineage of the Pellerin? Get away from me, I say, or by the life of my lord the Duke, I'll do what I said. You can't be from Miguel Tura. You must be some sly devil sent here from hell to tempt me. Tell me, you merciless man, I haven't had the governorship for a day and a half, and yet you want me to give you 600 ducados. Got 'em, Don Crass and Crude. Mm-mm-mm. The butler signaled to the farmer to leave the hall, which he did, head lowered and apparently fearful that the governor would act on his rage, for the great scoundrel knew his trade very well. But let us leave Sancho and his rage, dear reader, with no argument or quarrel, and return to Don Quixote, whom we left, with his face bandaged and treated for his feline wounds, which did not heal for 8 days, and on one of them something happened that Cid Hamete promises to recount as exactly and truthfully as all things in this history are recounted, no matter how trivial they may be. And that is the end of chapter 47. I was like, wait, numerals, Roman numerals. Okay, here we go. All right, so back to Sancho. Sancho. And it's just so funny. Okay, so the food trick is a little funny. I think that's pretty funny that all of this amazing food set out on the table, and there's somebody next to him who's like, no, you can't eat that. No, no, you can't eat that. It's gonna be bad for your health. No, no. Like, that's pretty funny. And there's like literally nothing on the table that he can eat. He's like, you need to eat wafers. I like that. And then he gets a note from a courier from the Duke that says that Sancho's life has been threatened and somebody will be attacking him and the insula very soon, and to start keeping watch constantly so that there is no fault, and that they can't get the better of him, basically. And so all of this while Sancho still hasn't eaten, and then a farmer comes in and tells the story of his sons and one of the like ladies that his son wants to marry, and is like, can you please just give the okay to say that like my son and this girl can marry. And the the governor Sancho is like, all right, well, is there anything else that you want? And he's like, well, it would be cool if you gave me 600 ducados as well. And Sancho is like, anything else? The farmer's like, no, 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 that's it. Just the note and the 600 ducados. And then Sancho is like, loses it and like, how dare you ask me for 600 ducados? If I had that money, don't you think that I would keep it? Why would I give it away? And I am hungry. I haven't eaten. I haven't slept. How dare you disturb me at this time? And that's where we ended. And the farmer just leaves. head, head hung low. Okay, let's see here. We can do another chapter. Excellent. One more chapter for the night. Chapter 48. Regarding what transpired between Don Quixote and Doña Rodriguez, dueña to the Duchess, as well as other events worthy of being recorded and remembered forever. A badly wounded Don Quixote, his face bandaged and marked not by the hand of God, but by the claws of a cat, was far too dejected and melancholy at the misfortunes inherent in knight-errantry. He did not go out in public for 6 days, and on one of those nights, when he was sleepless and awake, thinking about his misfortunes and his pursuit by Altisidora, he heard someone opening the door of his room with a key, and then he imagined that the enamored maiden was coming to assail his chastity and put him in a situation where he would fall short of the faith he was obliged to keep with his lady Dulcinea of Toboso. No, he said, in a voice that could be heard, believing what he had just imagined. The greatest beauty on earth will not influence me to stop adoring the one I have ingrained and impressed deep in my heart, and at the very center of my being, no matter, my lady, if you are transformed into an uncouth peasant, or a nymph of the golden Tahoe, weaving cloth of gold and silk, or are being held by Merlin or Montesinos, whatever they wish. For wherever you may be, you are mine, and wherever I go, I have been and shall be yours. The conclusion of these words and the opening of the door were all one. He stood on his bed, wrapped from head to foot in a yellow satin bedspread, a two-cornered beretta on his head, and his face and mustache bandaged, his face on account of the scratches, his mustache so that it would not droop and fall. And in this garb he seemed the most extraordinary phantom that anyone could imagine. He fixed his eyes on the door, and where he expected to see the overwhelmed and love-sick Altisidora came in, he saw instead a most reverend duenna, appearing white veils so long and intricate that they covered and enshrouded her from head to foot. In the fingers of her left hand she carried half a burning candle, and with her right hand she shadowed her face, so that the light would not shine in her eyes, which were covered by very large spectacles. She stepped very softly, and moved her feet very quietly. Don Quixote looked down at her from his observation post, and when he saw her manner of dress and noticed her silence, he thought that a witch or a sorceress had come in that attire to commit some villainy against him, and he began very quickly to cross himself. The terrifying vision continued to approach, and when she reached the middle of the chamber, she raised her eyes and saw with what urgency Don Quixote was making the sign of the cross, and if he was fearful at the sight of her figure, she was terrified at seeing his, because as soon as she saw him, so high and so yellow in the bedspread, and with the bandages that disfigured him, she screamed, saying, Jesus, what am I seeing? I love this visual of Don Quixote being all wrapped up in a bright yellow bed sheet and his face all bandaged. Terrifying if that's not what you're ready for. And then Doña comes walking through the door, all in white, and she's super tall. So they're both just terrified. That's hilarious. Hilarious. And she was so startled that she dropped the candle, and finding herself in the dark, she turned to leave, and in her fear she tripped on her skirts and fell with a great noise. A fearful Don Quixote began to say, I conjure thee, phantom, or whatever thou mayest be, to tell me what thou art, and to tell me what it is that thou wantest of me. If thou art a soul in torment, tell me, and I shall do for thee all that is in my power, for I am a Catholic Christian, and partial to doing good to everyone. For that reason I took on the order of knight-errantry, which I profess, whose exercise extends even to doing good to souls in purgatory. The dumbfounded dueña, who heard herself being conjured, associated Don Quixote's fear with her own, and in a low and grieving voice she responded, Señor Don Quixote, if your grace happens to be Don Quixote, I am no phantom or vision or soul in purgatory, as your grace must have thought, but Doña Rodriguez, the dueña of honor to my lady the duchess, and I have come to your grace because I am in the sort of need your grace usually remedies. Tell me, Señora Doña Rodriguez, said Don Quixote, by any chance has your grace come to act as a go-between? For I must tell you that I am not available to anyone, thanks to the peerless beauty of my lady Dulcinea of Toboso. In short, Señora Doña Rodriguez, I say that if your grace sets and puts aside all amorous messages, you may light your candle again, and come back, and we shall speak of anything you like and desire, except, as I have said, any invitation to the affections. I serve as anyone's messenger, señor, responded the dueña. Your grace does not know me very well indeed. I have not yet reached so advanced an age that I resort to such foolishness, for, God be praised, I still have my soul in my body, and all my teeth and molars in my mouth, except for a few that were taken by the Cartar, which is so common in the land of Aragon. But wait for me a moment, your grace, and I shall go to light my candle and return in an instant to tell you of my cares, as if you were the one to remedy all the cares in the world. And without waiting for a reply, she left the room where Don Quixote remained, calm and pensive, waiting for her. But then he had 1,000 thoughts regarding this new adventure, and it seemed to him that he had behaved incorrectly and shown worse judgment by placing himself in danger of breaking the faith he had promised his lady, and he said to himself, who knows if the devil, who is subtle and cunning, wants to deceive me now with a duenna when he has failed with empresses, queens, duchesses, marquises, and countesses? For I have often heard it said by many wise men that, if he can, he will give you a snub-nosed woman rather than one with aquiline nose. And who knows whether this solitude, this opportunity, this silence will awaken my sleeping desires and cause me, at this advanced age, to fall where I never have stumbled. In cases like this, it is better to flee than to wait for the battle, but I cannot be in my right mind, saying and thinking such nonsense, for it is not possible for a duenna in long white veils and spectacles to provoke or stimulate lascivious thoughts in the world's most susceptible bosom. Can there be a duenna on earth whose flesh is chaste? Can there be a duenna on the planet who is not insolent, affected, and pretentious? Begone, then, duenna-esque horde, useless for any human pleasures. Oh, how wise the lady who, they say, had 2 figures of duennas with their spectacles and pincushions, as if they were doing needlework at the end of her drawing-room couch, and the statues did as much for the authority as the room as real duennas did. And saying this, he leaped out of bed, intending to close the door and not allow Señora Rodriguez to enter. But as he was about to close it, Senora Rodriguez returned, holding a lighted candle of white wax, and when she saw Don Quixote more closely wrapped in the bedspread with his bandages and his cap or beretta, she became afraid again, took 2 steps backwards, and said, "Is my safety assured, Señor Knight? Because I do not take it as a sign of modesty that your grace has gotten out of your bed." "What'd you call me?" "I could very well ask the same question, Señora," responded Don Quixote, "and so I ask if I shall be safe from assault and violation." "From who or to whom, Señor Knight, do you ask that for that assurance?" responded the dueña. "From you and to you," responded Don Quixote, "for I am not marble and you are not bronze, and it is not now 10 in the morning, but midnight, or even a little later, I imagine, and this is a chamber more hidden and secret than the cave where the traitorous and reckless Aeneas enjoyed the beautiful and compassionate Dido. But give me, Señora, your hand, for I wish no greater assurance than that of my own continence and modesty, and that offered by these most reverend veils." And having said this, he kissed her right hand and held it in his own, and she did the same, with the same ceremony. Here Cid Hamete offers an aside that says, by Mohammed, he would give the better cloak of 2 that he owns to see them holding and grasping each other as they walked from the door to the bed. Don Quixote at last got into his bed, and Doña Rodriguez sat in a chair at some distance from the bed, not removing her spectacles or setting down the candle. Don Quixote concealed and hid himself completely, leaving only his face uncovered. And when the 2 had regained their composure, the first to break the silence was Don Quixote, saying, "Now, Señora Doña Rodriguez, your grace can reveal and disclose all that is in your troubled heart and care-ridden soul, for it will be heard by my chaste ears and remedied by my compassionate deeds." "I do believe," responded the dueña, "that your grace's gallant and pleasing presence one could expect only this Christian response. The fact, then, Señor Don Quixote, is that although your grace sees me sitting in this chair, in the middle of the kingdom of Aragon, and in the dress of an exhausted dueña in decline, I am a native of Asturias de Oviedo, and my lineage is crossed with many of the best in that province by my bad luck and the imprudence of my parents, who become impoverished too soon, not knowing how or why, brought me to the court in Madrid, and for their peace of mind and to avoid greater misfortunes, my parents arranged for me to do needlework in the service of a nobleman. I want your grace to know that no one has ever outdone me in the hemstitch or needlepoint." And there is a note after Asturias de Oviedo, and it says, "There were at the time 2 Asturian provinces, Asturia de Oviedo and Asturias de Sempiana. My parents left me in service and returned home, and in a few years they left there and must have gone to heaven, because they were very good Catholic Christians. I was an orphan, and depended on the miserable salary and grudging favors that maids like me receive at court. At this time, without any sort of encouragement from me, a squire of the house fell in love with me, a man somewhat advanced in years, bearded and imposing, and above all as noble as the king, because he was from the mountains." And there is a note right after mountains, and it says, "People from the northern mountains were considered to be noble because, compared to other Spaniards, they had relatively few Jewish or Moorish forebears in their family backgrounds." Our courtship was not so secret that it did not come to the attention of my lady, who, to avoid gossip and talk, married us with the approval and blessing of our Holy Mother, Roman Catholic Church, and from our marriage a daughter was born, putting an end to what good fortune I had, not because I died in childbirth, for I delivered safely and on time, but because not long afterwards my husband died of fright, and if I had time now to tell you about it, I know that your grace would be astounded." And at this she began to cry very piteously, and said, "Señor Don Quixote, your grace must forgive me, but I cannot help it, because every time I remember my poor husband my eyes fill with tears. Lord, save me. With what authority did he carry my lady on the hindquarters of a powerful mule, as black as jet itself? For in those days they did not use coaches or saddles, as they do nowadays, and the ladies rode behind their squires. This, at least, I must recount, so that you can see the breeding and manners of my good husband, just as they were entering Calle Santiago in Madrid, which is rather narrow, a court magistrate, with 2 bailiffs riding in front of him, was coming out, and as soon as my good squire saw him, he turned the reins of the mule, indicating that he would turn back and accompany him." And there is a note right where we left off, and it says, "If one came across a distinguished person in the street, it was a sign of respect, though it more often indicated self-interested flattery, to leave one's own route and accompany him." That is something that I would not do. I am on my way. I'm not gonna stop and then just continue along your way. No, no. My lady, who was riding on the hindquarters of the mule, said in a low voice, "What are you doing, you miserable wretch? Have you forgotten that I am here?" The magistrate, out of courtesy, pulled on the reins of his horse and said, "Señor, continue on your way. It is I who should accompany Señora Doña Casilda, for that is the name of my mistress." Just stalk them, no big deal, it's fine. My husband still persisted, with hat in hand, in trying to accompany the magistrate, seeing which my lady, full of anger and rage, took a thick needle, or it might have been a long hairpin, from its case, and struck him in the back, so that my husband gave a great shout and twisted his body around, knocking my lady to the ground. 2 of her lackeys hurried to pick her up, as did the magistrate and the bailiffs. The Guadalajara gate, the shiftless people loitering there, was in an uproar. My mistress left on foot, and my husband went to the house of a barber, saying that his innards had been pierced right through. My husband's courtesy became the subject of so much talk that the boys ran after him in the streets, and for that reason, and because he was somewhat short-sighted, my lady, the Duchess, dismissed him, and I have no doubt that this grief over this is what caused his death. And there is a note after Duchess, and it says, "Since there was no early indication of the lady's rank, Martin de Ricord believes that the printer confused this noblewoman with Doña Rodriguez's current employer." A little printer's error. That's fun. I was left a helpless widow, with a daughter to care for, whose beauty was growing like the ocean foam. Finally, since I was known for fine needlework, my lady the Duchess, who had recently married my lord the Duke, offered to bring me as well as my daughter to this kingdom of Aragon, where the days passed, and my daughter grew and was endowed with all the graces in the world. She sings like a lark, dances court dances like a lightning flash, and country dances like a whirlwind, reads and writes like a schoolmaster, and counts like a miser. I say nothing about her purity. Running water is not purer. And now, if I remember correctly, she must be 16 years, 5 months, and 3 days old, give or take a few. In short, the son of a very rich farmer who lives in a village not very far from here, which belongs to my lord the Duke, fell in love with my girl. The fact is that I don't know how it happened, but they met, and promising to be her husband, he deceived my daughter, and now he refuses to keep his word, even though my lord the Duke knows about it, because I myself have complained to him not once, but many times, and have asked him to order the farmer to marry my daughter. He ignores me, and doesn't want to listen to me, and the reason is that since the seducer's father is so rich and lends him money, and sometimes stands as his guarantor, that he gets into difficulties. When he gets into difficulties, he doesn't want to anger or trouble him in any way. And so, Señor, I would like your grace to take responsibility for righting this wrong, either by persuasion or by arms, For according to what everyone says, your grace was born into this world to redress grievances and right wrongs, and come to the aid of those in need. Your grace should keep in mind that my daughter is an orphan, and well-bred and young, and possessed of all those gifts that I have mentioned to you. For by God and my conscience, all the maidens that my mistress has, there is none that can even touch the sole of her shoe, and the one they call Altisidora, the one they consider the most elegant and spirited, can't come within 2 leagues of my daughter, because I want your grace to know, Señor, that all that glitters is not gold. This little Altisidora has more vanity than beauty, and more spirit than modesty, and besides, she's not very healthy. She has breath so foul that you can't bear to be near her even for a moment. And then, my lady the Duchess... But I'd better be quiet, because they say that the walls have ears. By my life, what is wrong with my lady the Duchess, Señora Doña Rodriguez? Asked Don Quixote. With that oath, responded Dueña, I must respond truthfully to what I have been asked. Señor Don Quixote, has your grace seen the beauty of my lady the Duchess, her complexion that resembles a smooth and burnished sword, her 2 cheeks of milk and carmine, the sun glowing on one, the moon on the other, and the elegance with which she treads, even scorns the ground, so that it looks as if she were scattering health and well-being wherever she goes? Well, your grace should know that for this she can thank God first of all, and then the 2 issues she has on her legs, which drain the bad humors that the doctors say fill her body. There's a note after 2 issues, and it says, an incision cut into the body to allow the discharge of harmful substances. Holy Mary, said Don Quixote, is it possible that my lady the Duchess has those drains? I would not believe it if I discalcet friars told me so, but since Señora Rodriguez says it, it must be true. But from such issues is such places that must flow not humours but liquid amber. Truly, now I believed that this incising of issues must be important for one's health. As soon as Don Quixote had finished saying this, the doors of his room banged open, and Doña Rodriguez was so startled that the candle dropped from her hand, and the room was left like the inside of a wolf's mouth, as the saying goes. Then the poor dueña felt her throat grasped so tightly by 2 hands that she could not cry out, and another person, with great speed, and without saying a word, raised her skirts, and with what appeared to be a slipper began to give her so many blows that it was painful. Although Don Quixote was near her, he did not move from the bed, and he did not know what it could be, and he remained still and quiet, even fearing that the thrashing and the blows might be turned on him. And his was not an idle fear, for when they had left the dueña bruised and battered, she did not dare even to moan. The silent scourgers turned on Don Quixote, and, stripping him of the sheet and bedspread, pinched him so hard and so often that he could not help but defend himself with his fists. All of this in the most remarkable silence. The battle lasted almost half an hour. The phantoms left. Doña Rodriguez picked up her skirts, and, groaning over her misfortune, went out the door without saying a word to Don Quixote, who, sorrowful and pinched, confused and thoughtful, was left alone, where we shall leave him, desiring to know which perverse enchanter had done this to him. But that will be told in due course, for Sancho Panza is calling us, and the harmonious order of the history requires that we respond. And that was the end of chapter 48. So that was weird. That was really weird. And I'm assuming that this is all part of what the Duke and Duchess have planned. I'm not sure if the dueña is in on it, like if she knew that was gonna happen. I don't really know. I'm just confused. So yeah, okay, so what happened? Don Quixote is standing in his room, and uh, Senora Doña Rodriguez comes in. They both scare each other. Um, and then Senora Doña Rodriguez confides in him about her misfortune and how her husband is now dead and she has a daughter and all of these things. And as she's talking, like towards the end of her talking, she drops a candle and she is attacked. She's like being choked. There's hands around her throat. Somebody lifts her skirts and starts just like slapping her, beating her. I don't know. And then like Don Quixote doesn't do anything. It's super dark. He can't see anything. He doesn't know what's going on. There's not really a lot of sound. And he's fearful that the attack is going to come to him. And lo and behold, it does. He just gets pinched everywhere. Pinch, pinch, pinch. And apparently it takes close to 30 minutes, which I don't understand how it lasted 30 minutes. That seems far too long to be pinched. The dropping of the candle could be a signal. Yeah, you're totally right. They were just like waiting, like in the hall or something like that. You're totally right. For sure. St. Patrick's Day in Spain. Wasn't wearing green, he was wearing yellow. Exactly. Oh my gosh. Okay, so that's going to be where we leave off. We are on page 772. That's amazing. Look, look. We're I'm gonna say this like every time. I feel like the last several times I've just like held it up and been like, look, like a dude who's been fishing who holds up his catch. Are you impressed? Look. Oof. But yeah, that's gonna be it for tonight. Oops. I will be back super, super soon. And we will pick up right where we left off. And I'm so excited. I'm so excited to see what happens. How this is gonna all right. I'm impressed. Thank you, Teddy. I'm just so curious to see how it wraps up. Like, what's gonna happen? What's gonna happen? So we will see. But yeah, that's gonna be it for tonight. I hope you all have a great night. I hope you're all hydrating, doing the things you gotta do to take care of yourself. And as always, whether you lurk, whether you chat, I 1000% appreciate you. And I 1000% appreciate your support. Thank you so much. Bye.